today's
Tyler,
webinar is
I see a
recorded.
Buffalo, New York. Sorry, Tyler, I didn't mean to jump in. But I just saw Buffalo, New York in there, and they had a big win this last week. Congratulations, Buffalo. Don't get me talking about sports and stuff. Sorry, go ahead, Tyler.
No, not at all. Thank you so much. Just wanted to let everyone know the session is recorded, and I just hit the record button, so we will send you a link to the recording at the end of today's last session. So that'll be in 3 very short hours. Val, we've got someone logging in from the Bahamas. That sounds pretty sweet.
Yeah, I see quite a few. There's quite a few from Canada, quite a few from East and West Coast. Wow, Bahamas, that's nice.
Awesome.
Covington, Kentucky. I know where Covington, Kentucky is. Yeah, welcome.
Well, thank you guys all so much for joining us. We are going to go ahead and actually get started right now. So I'm going to invite up my good friend Nathan Rogerson to just help us walk through some of the information for today's session.
Well, thank you, Tala, and welcome everyone. Today is day 1 of our Zoho Finance Workshop, and we're really happy to have everyone here, and we're really hoping that everyone can take something valuable from today's session throughout the week. And we prepared some pretty exciting sessions, and we'll get into that here in a second. Before we get started, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. So today's session is hosted by zoho.com/CPA. And this is all accountants and bookkeepers are welcome. Josh is actually a partner of ours, and he found us through that website. So go ahead and check it out if you're an accountant or bookkeeper, or if you're looking for an accountant or bookkeeper. We have a few partners on there that you can select and choose what partner can help you through your accounting. And so I wanted to go over a few things about today's webinar and kind of go over what showtime looks like for you. So let's go ahead and look at the left-hand side. You can see the questions panel, and that is where you will be able to ask us questions and about the session or any other Zoho questions you have. So you can go in there and say, hey, Tala, how do you do this in Zoho Books? And he'll be able to kind of either answer it live or we can answer it throughout the question panel. And you'll also have the chat box, which Tala pointed out earlier, where you can go and post anything you would like, just kind of letting us know that you can't hear us or that there's some sort of technical difficulties, or you can just tell us how you're doing in there. So today's session does qualify for 3 CPE credits. And if you would like to earn that, you need to attend the session for at least 180 minutes, and you need to complete 9 out of the 12 polling questions. We will also send out a survey at the end of the session. That's how you will receive your CPE credit if you would like to receive one. And we ask that anyone who does not want to receive a CPE credit, you fill that survey out as well, because it really helps us kind of better our webinars.
And one thing, Nathan, I just wanted to point out is that there's also the handouts panel, which has a few different links. We may add some links to that as we go into day 2 and day 3, but you'll find a few links there that you'll want to take a look at. One of the other important things to note for everyone here who is a small business owner who is kind of setting up their own accounting system, if you have an accountant or a bookkeeper that you're working with, we actually have an exclusive session for them on Friday. So it's going to be an hour session on Friday morning, and it's just an introduction to our Finance Partner Program, which is a free program for accountants and bookkeepers that you're working with. So this is a great way, if you have an established relationship with someone and you want to come into Zoho but still bring them along, we're going to introduce all of the benefits of the partner program to them. Again, it's a free program, and it also has some benefits for you, especially if you're using Zoho One. Your accountant can actually join your Zoho One license without you having to pay for a seat for them, which is really unique. So if you go into the handout section, you'll actually see there's a link for that session, which is going to be on Friday.
Yeah, we have it on the next slide. I actually have the link on that slide for anybody interested in sending that to their accountant. But for today's Zoho speakers, we have Val Stee. We heard from him a little earlier. Val, are you there?
Yes, I am. So very happy to be here, folks. My background is accounting. Actually, I am a CPA. I've been involved in accounting technology for many years. And most recently, I traveled the country and did a lot of CPE training for a lot of years with a company that I owned and had an opportunity to join Zoho and work on an accountant's program and jumped at the opportunity. So that's why I'm here. I'm very familiar with many other accounting technology companies, accountants programs. And so I was very thrilled to bring a lot of my experience with these other programs to Zoho. And we are currently in the process of adding features and functionality and benefits. So we're very happy to see you come in here and see what we have to offer today and talk to your accountants and maybe get them interested in our Zoho solutions as well.
Yeah, thank you, Val. Val will be the person, if you have any questions about, he can't answer a lot of questions about Zoho, but if you have any particular accounting questions, he loves to answer those. And I think he gets a kick out of it for sure. And so the person who put this webinar together for everybody is Tala Bakar. He actually was the one who planned out the workshop, and he said, hey, we're not traveling due to COVID-19. I think we should have some sort of workshop for our users. And he's the one who actually kind of decided to put this workshop together. So Tala,
hey, thanks so much, Nathan. Yeah, I really appreciate it. So just a little bit of background. I am the program manager for Zoho's Finance Partner Program. I've been at Zoho for about 5.5 years now. It's been a fantastic ride. So much has changed. For those who have been with us for even more than a couple years, if you ever go on Zoho.com, you'll notice that it feels like those apps are multiplying like rabbits. It is sometimes hard to follow all the new and exciting products we have coming out, but hopefully this session today, this entire day, and the next 2 days after this are going to help at least distill the finance suite of Zoho's applications and give you a good idea of what you can do with them, how you can integrate with the other applications inside Zoho. We're going to have guest speakers. It's really going to be an exciting workshop for the next several days. If you are looking at for the agenda, we'll actually post the link for that original registration page in the chat in just a moment. And so you can actually refer back to that anytime you need to see where we are. So thank you so much, Nathan. And I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, so everyone, my name is Nathan Rogerson. A little bit about me. I am the marketing finance manager over here at Zoho. But whenever I step in and start talking about accounting, do not worry. I do actually have 5 years of experience in accounting advisory role. So if I ever answer anything about accounting, you can trust me. I know what I'm talking about. And so just to get that out of the way, because I know a lot of people are kind of like, oh, he's in marketing, but I do have an accounting background.
And so just moving on to, this is the link that you were talking about for the finance workshop. The agenda, I'll pass it over to you, but just wanted to mention that in the chat box, I posted the actual link to the agenda. So if you need to refer back to that on an hour-by-hour basis, you can do so.
Yeah, thanks, Tala. So today is day 1 of the workshop, and today is just all about Zoho Books. So we'll be talking about, we'll be doing a Zoho Books demo with Tala, and then we'll also be doing a migration demo with Josh later in the session. And later in the week, kind of like what Tala was talking about, we have a lot of great sessions planned. We have an inventory session tomorrow, an expense 2.0, and subscription. That's all tomorrow. And on day 3, we're actually getting into a little bit more of the Zoho application. So we have a Zoho CRM presented by a CRM expert, Susan Clark. We've actually had her on a session before, and she's great. She's been in the industry for over 15 years, so she has a lot of experience, and she actually has a CPA, so she has accounting and CRM experience. So really great resource. And we'll be talking about, how do you have a relationship with your accountant, what that means, and what you need to do. Definitely, if you're getting a new accountant, everything you need to know to transition to a new accountant and how to prepare for that new accountant. And also, we'll be talking about Zoho Analytics, and that's going to be another great session presented by an analytics expert as well. And kind of what Tala was mentioning earlier, we are having a dedicated Zoho Finance Partner webinar. And this is, we asked that everybody ask their accountant to join. The link is right down there. And if they do join, you will receive a $100 Zoho wallet credit. And Val, I think you actually have more to add to this.
Well, yeah, we actually have a partner website, an accounting partner website, which is really zoho.com/CPA. I believe the link that's on the screen here, this is for the specific session on Friday, correct, Nathan?
Yes, it is, Val.
So they ought to write down two things. And throughout the 3 days here, you're going to see Zoho.com/CPA on a number of different places and slides. Now, don't let that throw you off. We had to pick a site. So that doesn't mean that bookkeepers and people that are not CPAs are not welcome. They are. That is the site for bookkeepers, accountants, CPAs, certified or chartered professional accountants, everybody. That's our site for now. As we get more support, we're going to probably add sites for kind of each category. So that's kind of our main partner site that we're driving off of with this link right here, this specific link for Friday for that session. One way or another, too, as we close up these sessions, we'll give you our contact information. And if you're having trouble, that's what we're here for. We're here to try to help you out, connect you with partners if need be, connect you with accountants if need be. And whatever you need, we're going to try to help you. That's our goal with this whole finance week. Realize that Zoho as a company for many years has been going around and doing these type of events live. For many years, they come around to different cities. Because of everything going on, we obviously had some stuff where we really felt like obviously we couldn't get to you live. And so we decided what we're going to do is a virtual event, pretty much very similar to what we would do live in different cities around the country. So as a company, we decided to do that. Now, just a little bit for you on Zoho. Many of you are going to say, what's a Zoho? It's not actually a funny little animal or anything. Zoho as a company has been in cloud suite of cloud applications for about 18 years. The company underneath Zoho has been around about 23, 24 years. I don't want to make your head spin, so let me keep this pretty well focused here. If you go to Zoho.com, you might be a little bit overwhelmed because what you're going to see is we have 60 plus applications. What we're talking about this week is more of a focused section of those applications, what we call the finance suite. Now, don't lose sight of what I just said, though. Those 60 plus applications give us unique value in the market. In other words, you're using books. Well, we happen to have an enterprise class CRM you can tie to that. You're using books. We also have a hiring tool that might help you be able to hire and manage that whole hiring process. You're using books. We also have a mail marketing management tool called Campaigns that helps you do that. So we could get way outside of the scope of the finance suite, but we're going to try to stay focused on these like 7 apps in the finance suite, which are invoice, books, inventory, subscriptions, expense, and checkout. So that's kind of where we're going to focus in the middle of this whole thing. Now, are we well known in certain areas of the globe more than others? We are a global company. We are in 120 locations around the globe. Now, the number I'm going to give you right now does have some free users in it, but it's a real number. We are over 55 million users globally. This company is privately owned, and we're not going anywhere. We continue to add features and functions every day. That is one of the key reasons why I joined Zoho. The future is extremely bright for this company and especially our finance suite as we become more sophisticated. So having said that, let's now focus in and step forward and talk about where we're going today with Zoho Books, especially for today.
Thank you so much, Val. I just wanted to really quickly bring up the link for the partner program that you mentioned. So this was the zoho.com/CPA page. Folks asked for how to access this. In the handouts tab, you'll find there's a link to the webinar, and then in the chat box earlier, I posted this link as well. Please go ahead and bookmark that. So Val, if it's okay with you, I'd like to jump into kind of the Zoho Finance portion of the application structure, yes, and then we'll jump into a demo after that. So just in case folks are following along, so right now we are starting our main session for today for the morning, which is Cloud Accounting with Zoho Books. The next main session for today is going to be a complete guide to migrating accounting systems. Fantastic session. It's going to be a whole lot of fun with Josh. So just wanted to let everyone know where we are. Now, before we actually jump into Zoho Books, and I just want to give everyone an expectation of what today's going to look like. Because this is a workshop, we're going to spend the entire time inside of the product. There is going to be everything from setting up your accounting system. We're going to walk through all of the different modules inside of Zoho. I'm going to take your questions. I really hope you can follow along, open up your instance of Zoho Books as well, kind of check out the applications for yourself. And today, of course, we're going to focus on Zoho Books. So when we talk about Zoho Books, where does this fit into the larger suite? Zoho Books is, of course, our primary accounting application, right? It's the double entry accounting system that everyone knows. It's the equivalent to the Xero and QuickBooks and other Sage, for example, other accounting systems out there. And inside of the Zoho suite of apps, if we're only going to look at the finance suite, because of course, as Val just mentioned, we have so many different products. Let's kind of narrow it down. It really is that central tool that interacts with all the other applications inside the finance suite. So when I talk about Zoho Inventory tomorrow, Zoho Inventory really is an extension of the items module or the inventory module in Zoho Books. Now, inventory does a lot of amazing things on its own, right? It integrates with your Amazon account, your website shopping cart that you might have. It ships with FedEx, UPS, and all the other kind of shipping services out there. But it expands the ordering system that's already in Zoho Books. You can use inventory on its own, but it's much more powerful with the accounting system. Same goes for Zoho subscriptions. It's a fantastic product that I think not enough people know about, and that's why we're going to dive into it tomorrow. But Zoho subscriptions extends the recurring invoice module that's in Zoho Books. So in your Zoho Books program, I like to think of it as the nuts and bolts of everything you'll need to run your accounting system. And when you need to expand that, you can bring in these other tools. Now, I want to pause for a second to talk about Zoho Invoice, because Zoho Invoice is a little bit different. Zoho Invoice is primarily for those companies who are either they're really small, right? We're talking about maybe independent contractors or freelancers who need something where they can do online invoicing, or it's actually for businesses that have some sort of legacy accounting system, but they just need to get online invoicing set up where they need to accept payments online. So Invoice is not a full accounting system, right? It has all of your accounts receivable portion, right? So sending out estimates, invoices, but it doesn't have a bills module, which is the accounts payable portion of an accounting system. So there is a seamless transition from Invoice to Books. So whenever someone outgrows Invoice, they want to move into a full-fledged accounting system, you can actually do that. So if you are currently using Invoice, I strongly suggest after today, once you see all the functionality of Books, you go into your Zoho Invoice account and you can actually simply hit a one-button upgrade. Everything that you had in Zoho Invoice will be in Zoho Books. The programs look almost identical. You simply have more modules. So I just wanted to get that out of the way about Invoice. We'll also talk about expense management tomorrow with the new reveal of Zoho Expense 2.0. Now, Zoho Books has an expense module already built in, but it's not going to be set up in the same way that you would need for employee reimbursements with expense reports and company credit cards and all that sort of stuff. So that's where Zoho Expense comes in. And then finally, we have Zoho Checkout, which is basically an online payments tool that lets you set up a checkout page, if you will, that information gets brought into your Zoho Books application. And of course, we have payroll, which we'll talk about in the last day, that's currently only available in California, Texas, and New York. We also have an international edition for India. We are working hard to bring those to other states. It's a little bit slow going, but hang with us. If you're in California, Texas, or New York, you'll get some information on that on the last day. So just wanted to let you know about how that setup really is for the suite. Now we're actually going to jump into Zoho Books. I'm going to switch to my screen so I can kind of show you, everything that we're going to do today. We're going to move through the application. So just give me a quick sec while I share my screen. And while I do that, I just want to let you know, if you have any questions for today at any point, please go ahead and put those questions in the question panel. You should see the Zoho homepage now on my screen. And so what I wanted to show you just real quick is as you navigate kind of Zoho, there's a helpful way to know where you are. So in the finance suite, we basically have these divisions, right? And so if you scroll down in the Zoho homepage, you'll notice that these are the applications we're going to focus on for today, the Zoho Finance apps. Now, we'll also talk about Zoho CRM, but you'll see, there are sales and marketing applications that kind of focus and integrate with each other. There's also email and collaboration applications. But one of the helpful ways to know what the main or anchor app of that suite is just looking at the largest icon you see here. These are essentially the kind of main products that folks would get into when they are exploring Zoho. And I know it's hard to know exactly where to go, but hopefully after today, you'll have at least a good idea of Zoho Books and where that fits in. So now actually jumping into Zoho Books. Now, the first thing I wanted to do is just talk about setting up your system. Now, of course, everybody who has already gone through the basic setup process, there's some basic information that Zoho Books is going to ask you to fill out. If you skip any of that information, you can always go back and in the organization profile by clicking on settings, right? So this gear icon is where you're going to find all of the different settings that we're going to go through for today. This is how you can navigate back to any of that. So right now we're in the organization profile, and you'll notice there are a couple of important things to take note of here. One of those is whether you are on cash or accrual basis. Now, I'll ask Val to kind of come up and give us his accounting spiel on how you should determine if you are cash or accrual. I will say that most businesses typically run on accrual, but I'll let Val kind of explain that in a more sensible way than I would.
Yeah, a lot of this comes down to what accounting standards that you're kind of required to do. But truth is, all businesses, to be honest with you, all businesses are accrual in the business setting. But what happens is many of them will take a simpler approach for filing of tax returns and other compliance-related documents. And so they'll fall back to what's cash basis. So they're only recognizing income based on what they have received and what they have spent. Now, to keep this fairly simple, most all of your government agencies will let organizations do that, run on the cash basis, as long as what's sitting in inventory, what's sitting in receivables, or what's sitting in payables is not a substantial material amount. In other words, does it really affect your financial position? Because companies can tend to try to hide stuff or overstate income by going cash basis with hiding stuff kind of in those buckets. Having said that, if you're not sure, just keep all of your books full accrual, like use your receivables, payables, use all your stuff as best you can. And then when you go down to actually need to print a report for one of your compliance filings, Zoho will immediately switch back to a cash basis for any of your reports. We know the math inside, and we can flip this around and get you a report, which then becomes like a cash basis income statement, showing your income pretty much only on what you have received, not what's sitting in an accounts receivable. So it's actually one of those little touchy things that a lot of companies with government entities will still argue, but underneath it, realize we're a full accrual accounting system, full double entry accrual accounting system that can be switched to cash basis when needed for reporting purposes to meet the requirements of government entities. A lot of business owners want to see the full accrual at all times, but then when they report, they want to go down to cash basis because that's a simpler way to go for what they're trying to do. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, thank you so much, Val. I really appreciate that. Just thought I'd get that out of the way because I know that's a critical question when you're setting up your system, and I don't want to have you stumped right, at the beginning.
Hey, Tal, before we begin,
sure.
I need to go ahead and launch our first poll question.
Sure, please do.
Yeah, and so you should see the poll question pop up on your screen. It's just saying, what industry are you in? So,
and if you ever miss a question, yeah.
Oh, yeah. If you miss a poll question, just click on the polls section on the left-hand side, and you'll be able to find the poll question you missed in there.
Thank you so much, Nathan. Sorry to interrupt you there.
No problem.
About the polls too, Tal, let me just say something.
Sure.
I posted a little paragraph earlier on that I had from one of our 1-hour webcasts. This is a 3-hour webcast. So technically, you're going to need to answer 3 times 3 questions or 9 or 10 questions in the 3-hour period of our we'll have 12 questions. Is that right, Nathan?
Yeah, yes, sir. We have 12 questions. You need to answer 9 out of the 12. And
right.
if you missed one, just let us know in the question panel just so we can see who it is that missed it. And we'll send you our email just so we can connect about the survey and filling that out for your CPE credit. I'll give it about 10 more seconds. And I did want to add something, Val, about the accrual versus cash and everything. A lot of businesses did use, whenever I did accounting advising, they did use accrual internally. But then as soon as they went over to their accountant, they just switched it over to cash just in the report. So accrual was mainly for budgeting, and then the cash was for how they did their taxes typically.
That's correct. That's correct. To be honest with you too, folks, running your business, you really do, for most parts, want to all be accrual because it gives you a better picture of what's really going on. But if you don't understand that, well, maybe just fall back for cash for very, very simple businesses. But it's pretty much what Nathan mentioned there. And what I would do is I would set the core system up as accrual. And then when I went down to actually print a report like an income statement, if I had to report that on a cash basis for tax return, you can switch just that report.
Yeah. All right. Thank you guys so much for going into that. And there was a couple questions about that. One is there any real difference? And so, yeah, there is a difference.
Oh, yeah.
In the system. I believe, for one example, if you're sending out an invoice in accrual basis, you'll have the option to do like net 30, net 15, things like that. And then the default for your reports. That's why Val was saying, think of accrual as a default because cash really kind of puts you in a box in terms of some of those options. Now, there's also another quick question I just want to answer, which is that for everyone who registered for today's session, that automatically registers you for tomorrow's session and the day after. So you can use that same registration link that you received, and you'll be able to access those sessions. The recordings will be sent out at the end of each day. So don't worry, everything's recorded. If you have to step out for a second, go to the bathroom or whatever, you can absolutely do that. Although we will have a break in about a little under 90 minutes or so, a little over an hour. So now moving on inside of your organization profile, and I hope you can see my screen moving right here. So setting up all your basic company information. Now, once this is set up, one thing that Josh is going to talk about later is actually migrating your other system if you're coming from another accounting system. So I'm not going to talk about things like opening balances right now because that's something that he'll get to. But one thing I want you to take a look at before you actually get started on anything is preferences. So inside of preferences, this is where you're going to select the modules that you're actually going to utilize inside of Zoho Books. So when we talk about these modules, these are, you'll have to make a determination of whether you're going to use these. One thing you can do is actually enable them like they are in my screen, and then go check them out, see if there's something you need. If not, you can come back and you can disable them, and that will actually kind of clean up the navigation pane. So we're going to go through these by actually taking a look at the workflow that Zoho Books has set up. Not everyone is going to use the same exact workflow that we have in terms of actually sending out estimates, then converting those to sales orders and then invoices. You may just send out invoices directly, but that's something that we'll actually take a look at. But if you find that you're not going to use retainer invoices and you don't want to clutter up your navigation panel, you can actually simply uncheck this box, hit save at the very bottom, and that will then go away. Another thing to kind of take note of here is there are a number of really important things under the first tab of preferences in general that you're going to want to take a look at. So let's say you are actually using retainer invoices. Now, what are retainer invoices? They're basically prepayments, right? When you think of like a lawyer or maybe someone who's another service-based business, an accountant, they may take an upfront payment for a part of their services, and they haven't yet delivered those services. So the default account is unearned revenue in your chart of accounts, but your accountant, or if you kind of have a way around your chart of accounts, may know a different account that you need to associate this to. So these are some of the areas where you'll see that. If you have, let's say, Zoho Inventory, and you need to enable the inventory modules in Zoho Books to make sure that they're all integrated, this is where you'll find that. And there are a bunch of other basic things that actually affect the rest of how rest of your interaction with Zoho Books that you'll find here. And a lot of people just kind of don't look at these. So I recommend you take a look at them kind of towards the beginning. So one of the important questions is, do you give discounts? And if you do, is it on a specific line item or is it on the whole invoice? And this is actually going to change on the invoice where the discount field appears. So in this case, we have it set at the line item level. And do you actually make any adjustments or charge for shipping? Do you want those fields there? you may not want them. So you can actually customize whether you can see them. And then we'll talk about setting up taxes in just a moment when we get into the tax section. But do the items prices that you have listed, do those include tax or do they exclude tax? Typically they exclude tax. So just want to make sure that you have that information listed here. If you have any salespeople, whether you want a field for salespeople, as we currently do. And there's some really cool automation functions, even including this basic summary report that you can send yourself. When we take a look at the reporting module a little later, you'll notice that you can actually automate a lot of these to be sent to you, so you don't actually have to go in. So this is a great thing that may be important to you. You can actually take a look at this, view a sample, see if that makes sense. And then finally, if you need to set up your organization's address format, somebody has kind of changed this earlier, but you can actually insert these placeholders and change this. So we can actually do that right now and say we have street address 1 with a next line followed by city, comma, state or province, and a postal code. And we'll go ahead and hit save, and that will change how those PDFs appear. Now, while this reloads, what we're also going to want to take a look at is something that's really important, are some of the other modules and those preferences that you have here. So we're going to come back to these after we take a look at the actual module, but just know that every single module inside Zoho Books has some kind of customization or preferences that you're going to want to take a look at and make sure they are exactly how you want them. So don't just assume that what you see is what you get. You can change this up to make sure it follows exactly how your business functions. Now, the one thing I also want to point out before we actually get into the module is make sure you take a look at templates. So templates allow you to customize how your invoices or estimates appear. You may have a specific format that you'd like to see, or you may want to customize your own template layout. You can actually come into the template section and fully create your own custom template. So you can use one of these kind of base templates. And then once you do that, you can actually go in and customize what this looks like. So I'll go into this existing template that I have. And you'll notice that here on the left-hand side, I can actually modify the header, the item tables, and really anything that you see here. Okay, so let's actually go ahead and jump in to the main dashboard, and we'll work our way through there. Just give me 1 second. All right. So when we're taking a look at the dashboard, the first thing to kind of take note of is this is where you're going to get all your main information right away. So this is not a customizable dashboard, but it is something that changes as the information you have coming into the system changes. So for example, if I'm taking a look at my total receivables, I can actually highlight over, and right now I only have overdue receivables. You'll notice that there are no current receivables. We'll change that. But I can simply hover over this particular bar. I'll see that there is a total overdue receivables amount that matches down here. But I can go ahead and click on this, and it'll actually take me to a report for aging details. So this is how a lot of the dashboard is navigated. It's kind of a interactive sort of function that you can use. And so you can actually keep diving down. So even though I'm in this aging details report, I may want to actually take a look at this particular invoice, or I want to take a look at all of the invoices from this particular customer. So we can actually go ahead and click on one of those customers and find out all their information related to them listed here. Now, another thing that you're going to want to take a look at is some of these shortcuts that you have around Zoho Books. So if you actually need to create an invoice, you can do that directly from here. You'll also notice that in the sales module, which we're going to take a look at these modules, there's a plus icon. So there's a few kind of shortcuts here and there. Once you actually start using the system more often, you'll be able to utilize some of those. The same exists for total overdue payables or current payables that will show up here as well. I can click on those and take a look at the bills that I need to pay. Now, below that, you have a few graphs related to kind of income and cash flow and expenses. So for this cash flow graph, I can actually change the period of time. So let's say we're taking a look at this fiscal year. And in our organization preferences, we've said that our fiscal year runs from June to May. You can also take a look at the last 12 months. And so if I hover above any of these particular points in time, you'll notice that you have your opening balance, your ending balance, and the amount of cash flow that was coming in and going out. But I can go ahead and actually click on this and take me to a cash flow statement as well. One of the things you want to take a note of in your different reports is that there are different customization options for reports, and they change based on the report you're taking a look at. So let's say I'm actually taking a look at a report for this year, but I want to take a look at the previous quarter. I can run that, and I can actually run that and compare it to a different quarter. So maybe I'm going to take a look at the current quarter, and I'm going to compare that with the last quarter. We can go ahead and run a report and see a comparison here. I can add a note if I want to actually write some information about this for later. And then if I need to export this, I can do so to export it to a PDF, an Excel file, or to Zoho Sheets. So for those that are kind of newer to the Zoho ecosystem, you'll see that Zoho basically has an app for almost everything you need. So let's say you're using a Chromebook or you don't have Microsoft Excel installed on that particular computer, you can actually click on Zoho Sheets, and it'll open up Zoho's program that looks a whole lot like a spreadsheet system that you're used to. So one thing you can do inside of those export files in Zoho Sheets is there are typically more information that comes from different sources. There are more columns. Of course, you can do calculations as you would in any Excel file, but this is all browser-based and is included in your Zoho account. All right, real quick before we move on, I just want to point out that there are a number of resources for all of these different modules that I'm going through. And if you ever need to take a look at some of these resources, you can use the help and support icon at the very top right to actually find them. So if you click on the question mark icon, you'll see help documents listed here. There's a migration guide. Really, the one that I always go to is the help docs. The help docs are basically an index that allow you to take a look at the specific module you're working on and the information related to that module. So for example, if you're wanting to take a look at reports, you can actually come down here, take a look at some of these specific reports listed here, and let's say business overview and cash flow. And it'll give you information about this particular report. If you may be confused on something, please take a look at this. It'll give you a lot of good information. All right.
Hey, Paul, I don't mean to stop you again. I need to launch the second polling question.
Sure.
And you're giving me a lot of good information. And I see a lot of people having questions about invoice customization. And I sent the link out, but Tal, is there a way you could go over that a little later once you get into the sales section within?
Sure, absolutely. We're going to go into that in detail.
Yeah. So the question is, have you ever used Zoho Books before? So we do have, the majority of everybody has used it. And 28% actually have never used Zoho Books, but they have used other Zoho applications. So that's interesting. Cool, cool, cool. Give this about another 10 seconds. What are you saying,
Sure.
Tal?
No, one thing I'll do is if you have any questions for me, I'll take a look at them while we do the poll questions. So I'm going to take a look at a few of these right now, and I can actually project them onto the screen. So let's go through a few of these questions real quick. So there's a quick question about setting discount formats at the invoice level. So unfortunately, it's the discount formats are kind of at a global level for your account. So whether it's at a line item or at the invoice level, it's going to be across the system. So you do have to choose one of those. There's a question about auto-generating reference numbers. So if this is in regards to the actual invoice number on a document like invoices, you can absolutely auto-generate those, and you can turn on and off that. There are some fields for reference numbers, like in a sales order. Those do not auto-generate. So it depends on which field you're talking about, may or may not. We are going to go through the projects timesheet system inside of Zoho Books in a minute. We're going to take a look at that in detail. So in the trial version, you may not see some of the different options. You should if you're still in your kind of main trial period. If that has expired, just go ahead and reach out to Zoho Books support, and they can extend that for you. And I'll show you how you can actually use the chat support inside of your system. The logo upload is in under the organization profile. I'll have to, if you have a more specific question and you'd like to follow up with us exactly where that is, let us know. We can definitely do that for you. All right. Jumping back into the system, and the chat I was talking about is here at the bottom right. So this is available 24 hours a day, Monday through Friday. I believe it's based on Eastern Standard Time. But you can actually ask a question to someone on the Zoho Books support team. They will respond very quickly. That's my primary mode of, anytime I have a quick question. So for example, if you are in an expired trial, you need to extend that, just go ahead and ask them. They can definitely help you with that. But if you have general questions, just go ahead and use the live chat. The folks are really friendly, and usually they can answer a question really, really fast. All right, so moving down to a couple other things before we jump into the next module. So the next thing I want to focus on are some of the business overview reports, like the income and expense. So this takes you to a profit and loss statement if you hover above any of these. And one thing you'll notice, as Val mentioned, is you can always switch between cash and accrual basis if you need to on a particular report. So as I mentioned, clicking on any of these bars will actually take you to the report. So go ahead and click on that. It'll take you to a profit and loss statement, and you can customize a number of options there. You'll also find your top expenses kind of pie chart listed here on the right-hand side. So same customization options for different time frames. Go ahead and click on this dropdown to actually be able to compare and take a look at a previous quarter or month. So we haven't added a bunch of information in this particular demo account, but you are able to take a look at those. Excuse me. So when we're taking a look at the projects module, that's going to be actually listed under time tracking. So this is really a simple way to create and bill time-based projects to your customers. So if you are billing based on an hourly rate, if you have multiple folks kind of working on tasks for a particular client, you need to build those. This is a great way to actually record that time, to actually be able to charge your clients. And there's a number of ways you can actually add time. So one is from the Zoho Books mobile app, which I recommend everybody downloads. You can add time from there. You can also do it from your Chrome browser. There's an extension for Zoho Books to add time. And then, of course, you can log into Zoho Books and do it too. So we will take a look at that. One of the modules we are going to jump into soon is the banking and credit card module. So banking and credit cards allows you to integrate your bank account with your Zoho Books account or credit card account. The benefit of this is that you actually get those transactions coming in directly from your bank account into Zoho Books. We'll take a look at that inside of banking. The reason you would want to do this, folks kind of ask, why would you want that? Is you want to be able to verify that the funds that you have, that you've received from a customer, let's say they've made a payment, actually make it to your bank account. And then you want to be able to reconcile that. So there is a reconciliation process that says, yes, I received $100 on invoice number 205 from this customer. And then once it actually gets deposited in your bank account, you can match that invoice payment that you received with the actual deposit in your bank account to know that that has happened. The same goes for expenses and bills to make sure that things that you've marked as bills and expenses actually get paid and is withdrawn from your bank account. It's a really important process to make sure, especially if you are using the accrual basis, as we mentioned, like most businesses are, you may come to a point, right, especially with bills, that you have some time to pay those bills. And you want to make sure that those actually get paid on time. And similarly, that a customer has paid you and you want to make sure that you have actually received those funds and there's not some other issue, like a bounce check, for example, or some other issue with your credit card processor. So we'll take a look at the different credit card processors once we go into that. So real quick, I want to jump into the items module. The items module in Zoho Books lets you set up a really basic inventory system. Now, if I click on the plus icon, this isn't just for inventory, it's also for services. So let's say you're a service-based business, but you have standard prices on many of your services, maybe it's an hourly rate. You can actually list those here. And if you have, these are all particular pieces of information from Zoho inventory that are being brought into this account. That's why you see kind of length, width, and height, and kind of SKU numbers and ISBN and things like that. But let's say, for a service, you don't actually have any purchase information. So you're just going to list the basic sales information here and the account that this particular product is going to go to. Now, if you actually have, a particular sub account for different lines of business, you can actually choose exactly which account, but sales is the default account that is required for most of those transactions. Now, if you actually do have a product, you're going to want to input some purchase information about how much that product costs to help calculate profitability. You can actually do that here as well. And then there are some advanced functions, even inside of Books, without having to go into Zoho Inventory. So one of those is actually being able to track how much inventory you have in your stock and simply get a notification once you fall below some sort of threshold. So let's say you typically stock 100 of these items. Once you fall below 20, you want to just be notified. You can actually set a reorder point of 20 and kind of an initial stock if you've added this new item. And then you might have a preferred vendor that you can select. And so that allows you to quickly generate a purchase order that you can send to them. So you do have some advanced functions as we mentioned here. Now, there are a number of other modules. I'm not going to go into composite items, inventory adjustments, and transfer orders because these are actually coming from Zoho Inventory. So you're not going to see these in your Zoho Books account unless you have integrated that product with it. One of the ones that do come with your items module is price lists. So price lists basically let you set up a custom set of prices for a particular customer maybe, or for a particular period of time. So let's say you are running a sale and you want to have a really quick way of actually creating a set of prices for this sale. So I'm going to call this December 2020 sale. And we're going to say that this is a percentage mark down on all of our items and services. So let's say we're doing a flat kind of 15% off, and it's going to apply to every single item. And once you'll see in the invoice module that there is a dropdown that lets you select a price list. You can also select prices that are reflected for specific customers. So if I give some sort of bulk discount to maybe a wholesale customer that I have, I can create a price list just for them. So I'll name this, customer XYZ. And when I go into the customer's profile in our Zoho Books account, I can associate that with them. You can either do, again, this percentage markup or markdown, or you can do an individual rate. So let's say you give a discount based on only certain items for this particular customer, or you have a sale on only certain items. You can apply those new prices here. You can import a price list for those items if you need to. So you can do that through a CSV file or an XLS. And you can even give volume-based discounts. So if a customer purchases, between 10 and greater, or 10 and 50 of these items, they are at a different rate per item. So it's pretty interesting in terms of being able to do this. You can actually do multiple tiers as well. So if there's a greater discount as you go up, this is a really fantastic feature for volume-based pricing discounts. And so you can simply create a price list that reflects them, either, again, associate them to a customer, or just select them at the time of generating the invoice. So pretty neat function there. So those are the two functions I wanted to talk about inside of the items module. Now, before we actually go into banking, I want to go into our customers and vendors and show you what those look like. So under sales, we've actually added customers down here, and under purchases, that's where you're going to find vendors. So when we go under the customer section, one of the things that you'll note of is you can get a lot of information about a specific customer here. So this may be a good way, instead of searching for an invoice under the invoices tab, you may simply want to come here, look for a particular customer that you have, and go ahead and select them. So let's go ahead and look for, I have a customer named Andrea James, and I want to actually take a look at invoices that Andrea James has recorded here for her. So I can see the status of these. If I need to send Andrea a statement, there's actually an option here for me to look at a statement and send this out to her if I need to do that. And I can generate new transactions. I can look at an overview. So if there's any outstanding receivables, I'll notice that Andrea actually has $57 in unused credits. So that's something that I can apply to her next transaction. I can reach out to her. And there's a number of ways you can kind of automate looking at a lot of these. this is a really important place for managing this customer's information. One of the things that you'll find here is a way to configure the client portal. So one of the great benefits of Zoho Books is that it comes with a client portal built in. And the client portal allows customers to make online payments. If they have a relationship with your account, with your business, they can log in. They can view hours to a timesheet that you've created. They can actually communicate with you through there, update their own information. It's a really great place to keep clients updated. Now, of course, if that customer just has a kind of one-time relationship with you, they don't need to be set up in a full portal. You can actually email them a invoice. They can simply pay it on a one-time portal. But if you do have that recurring relationship, this is where you're going to want to set that up. So simply by hitting this checkbox and hitting save, it's going to send this particular customer. So this is the email address that we have for this customer on file. It's going to send them a templated email, and you'll find that under templates that you can actually customize, but it basically has a link for them to set up. I can also set an initial password for them, and I can communicate this password to them. As soon as they log in with this password, it's going to prompt them to change that password. Now, if we're going to take a look at this client portal, that's something that under settings, you'll find the link for. So I'm going to go under settings, preferences, and under portal. So the client portal here, there is a kind of initial portal URL that you're given based on the portal name that you give for your business. It has to be a unique portal name that no one else has taken. But what you can also do is you can customize the domain. So let's say you already have a business domain. You have, www.mybusiness.com, and you want to have a portal called, portal.mybusiness.com. You can map your custom domain to Zoho Books if you're using Zoho One, or if you are on the professional plan of Zoho Books. And instead of having this URL, you'll actually have a custom URL. It's a pretty neat way to do that. So we're just going to use this particular link. And I just want to show you that there are a few different options here that you may want to take a look at. So for example, if you don't want customers to edit their own information, you can simply uncheck that. If you need them to be able to view only some services, like you're going to view a sales order, but maybe not projects, you can choose those options, or even subscriptions that they've enrolled in. So this is kind of integrates across Zoho's other finance applications. You can set up those functions here. Excuse me. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this link to show you what the portal looks like. So one of the things to note of is that even with this URL, there is no mention of Zoho on the portal. You'll see that this is actually the logo for this business. Excuse me. You'll see that this is actually the logo for this business, and you can customize all of this. So let's see if I can remember a login that I have. Hopefully I can get in. Oops. I may need to.
While you're trying to figure that out, Tala, I'll go ahead and launch the third poll question.
Sure.
And just a reminder, if you miss any poll questions, just go to the polls panel and you'll be able to find the question you did not answer.
Also, folks, if you could try to put your questions in the questions area, that way we can track the answers and stuff. I've seen a number in the comments area. I'm trying to look at both areas and answer questions as best we can. But if you could put the questions in the questions area, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
All right. Once you guys have that poll underway, let me know and I'll switch back.
Awesome. And the poll question is, what type of integrations do you use / are important to you? And with no surprise, it's CRM software.
Folks, there have been a number of questions too about security. If you understand the SOC standards, there's SOC 1, SOC 2, and SOC 3. Zoho is a SOC 2 compliant security tool. We don't have access to any of our clients' data. We are completely GDPR compliant and SOC 2 compliant. We are very, very big on privacy. We don't allow third-party people to pick off tags or your usage, or all we know is, for example, we know that you're subscribed and signed up for certain products. We have no idea which products you're using, how much you're using of it, or what your data looks like. We're extremely private. I'm extremely concerned about that. We're one of the few companies in the market that will not sell user data. We absolutely don't sell any user statistics or data or anything. In fact, we've severed ties big time with Google over this, and we've stopped doing a lot of Google AdWords and other stuff completely because of the privacy issues. So if you want to look at a standard for security, just go look up the SOC standards. Those are SOC, SOC 1, 2, 3. We're SOC 2 compliant, and very high standard according to the accounting standards that are out there.
Yeah, thank you for that, Val. And Tali, you can continue now.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to take a quick second to answer a few questions I see here. All right, so Ray has a question about being able to configure variants of items. So there isn't a particular way to set up a variant other than just creating a new item. So if you need to create a new item, absolutely you can do that. There's no limitations on the professional plan or Zoho One plan. There may be some on the lower plans. I'd have to check. Absolutely. This is a great thing. Thanks, Liz, for mentioning this. Price lists are handy if you have different currencies. So instead of having to actually just use the conversion system that Zoho Books has, because it might give some clunky numbers, especially if those aren't reflecting the exact conversion rates that you have, set up a price list if you actively sell to customers in Canada or in the States, vice versa. Thank you so much, Liz, for mentioning that. So if you drop ship your items, you're going to want to take a look at how you're actually listing the prices of those items. So if you are not keeping stock of those items, you may want to simply add them as a service item and have that line item there with a particular price. You may want to add them manually. It really depends on the setup of those items. So the one issue is if you set them up as goods and you're not actually delivering those items, you'll need to select drop ship each time and remember to do that. Otherwise, you're going to go into some sort of negative inventory territory. Is there any advantage in setting up purchase information if operating a service-based business? Great question. This could potentially, for a service item, as I mentioned, if you select that radio dial at the top of the items module, could be useful if you have some sort of, let's say, labor costs to that service that you want to include on a default basis. That's something that you may want to do. I've seen some businesses do this. So for example, there was a business I was working with who they basically built websites, which is a service, but there was a fixed cost of setting up the actual domain and some of those other affiliated expenses. And so they were able to add purchase information to that to help calculate profitability. All right. Does this apply item sales for retained managed services if customer provides a certain number of projects within a specific period of time? So I think this probably refers to the timesheet module. So we'll take a look at that. I may need some clarification to help answer that question. So related lists. Yeah, so I kind of skipped over that. Related lists is a really cool feature that basically helps pull in information from a different part of Zoho. So for example, in the invoice module, you can create a related list that is pulling all of your list of items, for example, or maybe you have some other sort of list of products you may have. It just pulls information from a different module. So instead of actually having to manually enter those, especially if they're changing, so if you have projects that may be coming in, there's a number of use cases we'll take a look at a lot more kind of in the third day on the automation and kind of analytics session. But it's really for being able to pull in information from a different part of your system. So thank you for that. I know there's more questions. We'll take a look at those, but I want to jump into the client portal real quick. So in the client portal, you'll notice that there are a number of things for this customer to actually take a look at really quickly. So if they have any outstanding invoices or any available credits, they'll want to take a look at those. They can see that they actually have available retainer payments. So this is payments that they've already made that are going to be applied to future invoices. And then they'll also see a list of recent payments that they've made. They can view those invoices here if they need. You'll notice that in Zoho Books, we enabled the different options to let them customize their information here. So let's say they move and they need to actually update their address. They can do so on their own, and it'll automatically update in your Zoho Books profile for them, as well as all the other applications that you have integrated into your Zoho Books. So especially, let's say, CRM, which we're going to talk about on the third day. If you've integrated your CRM account, which has all the information for different customers, it'll actually update their address all the way up to there. They can also, of course, take a look at different sales documents. So we're going to jump into how to set these up in just a moment. But you'll notice that, if they need to pay, they can actually go ahead and make a payment. And on an invoice or different, let's say retainer invoices or regular invoice, you can actually select which mode of payment you want to enable for them. So in this case, we selected PayPal and a credit card option. So they can choose between either of these two, and the payment gateway that we have integrated here is to checkout. So if they go ahead and click on this, it'll open up a PCI compliant page. Of course, this is a demo account, so that's why it doesn't show up here, but it will bring them to a secure checkout page for this particular invoice. Same goes for PayPal. So if they pay through here, what happens is that the invoice is automatically marked as paid. All of the kind of dominoes begin to fall to help recognize that payment as being received, including being able to actually mark them as received once they hit your bank account. So we are going to take a look at the different payment gateways. There are a dozen different payment gateways that Zoho has, and they have some different benefits, and some of them have some drawbacks too that we'll talk about. So this is a place for the customer to come take a look at all of this information here, view a statement of their own account with you. As I mentioned, you can kind of enable and disable some of these modules for them if you'd like. So I mentioned earlier that they can actually communicate with you directly inside of the product. So what I mean by that is, in a particular invoice or document, they can post a question. And so they can say, this price looks off, please call, or some other comment that they may want to add. And if we take a look at invoice 105 back in Zoho Books, so let me find invoice number 105. And I may need to do some zeros in front of that. So I'll click on this particular invoice, and then I'll be able to see under comments and history that the comment from this customer actually showed up here. And I can actually view that. And I can add a comment back if I want to. And this comment that I add back can be just for internal purposes for other folks inside the organization, or if I want to display it back to the customer, sorry about that, we'll contact you this afternoon. And once that's posted, the customer will get a notification, and they'll also see that comment show up here. So it's kind of interesting. This is something that, instead of having an email that may reference some piece of information or conversation related to a document that is going to be hard to track later, this is always going to be attached to this particular invoice. So this is a great place to put these comments. Again, if you are adding comments for internal purposes, those comments do not show up in the portal unless the display in portal box is checked. So that's important to note there. So that kind of brings us to the end of the client portal. I know Nathan's probably going to want to launch a poll question right about now. So before we jump back into the next sales module, I will let Nathan do that.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and launch the fourth polling question. And Tal, if you can go through the questions panel and just kind of knock some of those out, you can answer
Sure.
live or in there. So the question is, what section in your accounting software do you spend the most time? So hopefully it's not in purchases, but I know a lot of people, you got to purchase a lot of goods sometimes. I like to see that over 60% is in sales, which is great. It's great news. That means y'all are doing well. Val, what section in your accounting software did you use to spend the most time?
Wow, that's a good question. It kind of comes back to your job function.
Mm-hmm.
What you do is a job function as a general accountant, you're mainly looking over financial statements and journal entries. If you obviously work in collecting bills, you're going to work in receivables, payables the other way. Kind of depends on a job function. Business owner is mostly going to be looking at financial statements and watching cash flow. Most importantly, watching cash flow. So
yeah, cash flow and reports.
Right.
So real quick, I just want to request that if you have a question, please go ahead and put those into the questions panel. I am taking a look at chat every now and then, but may not be able to respond to them because it's kind of in line, makes it a little bit difficult. Just wanted to project a few questions here. So Tom has a question on being able to see the client portal and its contents before you give access to the client. There isn't kind of a sandbox way, but a workaround that I can think of is you can simply add another contact person under a client and put your own email, and then you can enable the portal that way and kind of see what it looks like if you want to. That may be kind of a useful workaround there. Is there any information that a client can't access through the client portal? I would want clients to be able to download project reports. So they cannot download any kind of reports inside the client portal, and you can choose if you don't want them to see certain information. Like for example, if you don't want them to see hours that have been logged that are not billed, you can do that. So they can only see hours that are billed on a project. The main thing you want to do is inside of the settings option that we talked about earlier. So settings, preferences, and portal. You're going to want to take a look at those options. Those are all of the different options in terms of limiting their access. It is kind of simple, so there's not going to be a whole lot to drill down. So this is a great question, Joseph. Why doesn't this portal connect to other Zoho apps yet? So we are actually, this is something I know that's confirmed, is developing a centralized portal for all Zoho apps. So for example, there is an application called Zoho Desk, which is our support ticketing application. So a lot of folks may use that. So instead of having customers email you a question, they still send an email to your email address, but instead of an inbox, they come into Zoho Desk where they can be given to a different support person, all that sort of stuff. That product has a portal. There's other products that have portals too. We are building a unified portal that brings in the finance applications with other Zoho products and being able to actually just enable the different tools that you're using. That's something that's going to be part of Zoho One because you have access to all those applications. So I don't actually have information on development timelines, but this is something about at the beginning of this year, I was told, it was something that we are working on. So excited for that. Hopefully we can get you some more information. In our work, we need to issue a pro forma invoice, and after payment, we convert it to a sales invoice. How can we make this happen in Zoho Books? So you can actually create, let's say, like a estimate and convert that to a sales order. And then from a sales order, you can create individual invoices. We'll talk about the different workflows that you have to do that there. Can the portal accept ACH payments? Yes. So we actually have an integration with authorize.net. That's one of those payment providers. They allow for ACH payments. And of course, ACH payments allow you to have a number of benefits. One is a lower cost of transactions. I believe it's about 50 cents a transaction as a flat rate. That is the one that allows you to actually accept ACH payments there. So if client updates their information in the portal, is there a place where I can see historical information? So the only information the client can update really is the address information. And that's a good question. I believe there is definitely a log of all of the access, changes, anything they view inside of the portal, as there is an activity log across anything that's done inside your Zoho Books account. So yes, from a log standpoint, you can definitely pull information and see what's changed. It depends exactly what information that is, but as I mentioned, the customer can really only change their address information and kind of contact information that I see there. And we'll take one more. So migrating from Accounting Edge, struggling with uploading each individual year. So we're going to talk about migrations in the next session. This is probably a question that we can present to Josh. We'll help upload, give information on uploading individual years and some strategies to do that. All right, fantastic. I'm going to move back into the product. And now I wanted to actually talk about the kind of workflow, if you will, that I talked about at the beginning of the session. So because we have all these different kind of sub-modules under sales, so we have estimates, retainer invoices, sales orders, it can be a little bit confusing. So I'll kind of break this down for you. If your business actually sends a document that, some folks call this a quote, you can use estimates to actually have a customer record of them accepting that before you bill them. So this is kind of the start of Zoho's workflow. So if we go ahead and create an estimate, and we'll select a customer, so we'll say this is for Aaron Brown, you'll notice that I have a tax rate that's already associated with this customer. We do have to take a look at taxes, and we'll talk about that. There's some basic information that's listed here. I believe there's a question earlier on automating the reference number. So this field, this reference number field, is not something you can automate. This is something that's not mandatory. If you want to actually utilize this, it can refer back to a different module. A lot of these fields, sometimes the reference number field, I've noticed, like if you're using the sales order module and you have invoices associated with sales orders, it'll place in the sales order number in the reference field for a particular invoice. So that's something that kind of helps you go back, but that's done automatically. If you find that these are manually being created, you can simply click on the settings icon here for the estimate number or the invoice number and change this to auto-generating. And if you have migrated in from another accounting system, you may want to put your starting number for these invoices so you don't start at 1 again, for example. Or if you simply have a different prefix that you want to utilize or a different number kind of sequence, you can do that here too. There are some custom fields to take a look at. So we have kind of a margin field that somebody's added here. Projects, if this customer has any projects, you can actually associate them in this estimate if you need to send out an estimate for that. And then you have salesperson as we're utilizing here. So if there is an expiration for this estimate, of course, set that up as well. So now in this case, let's say I'm just gonna put in an estimate for this training, and per hour training, we charge $149, and we're gonna do this for 3 hours. So our total here is $447. One thing that you may want to take a look at some point, folks kind of gloss over this, is I'll zoom in, there is this ellipsis. Whoops. I'll zoom out real quick so you can see this. There is this ellipsis that allows you to actually edit some particular information on this line item. So if you click on this ellipsis at the very far right, you'll see that there's show additional information. And this is where you may want to, so in this case, it's for estimates, it's showing kind of some reporting tags you may want to associate with this particular transaction. And so reporting tags, someone asked earlier if you can actually run reports based on classes. So in Zoho Books, we refer to the same idea of classes in QuickBooks as reporting tags. So these are custom tags that I have. If you have, let's say, a line of business and you want to create some sort of categorization for that, a reporting tag would be a great way. Again, these are all custom, right? These are ones that I've created. You can create your own. And you can simply associate this particular line item with a particular line of business. And then you can run a profit and loss report, a cash flow statement, a business overview report based on that information. So this may be something that you want to actually associate at the line item level for all of these services that you provide or items that you provide. And so if you go into items, when we added an item, there is a field for reporting tags, and you can add those. To actually set up a reporting tag is, of course, going to be under settings and reporting tags. So when we take a look at reports again, I'll show you what those reporting tags look like. So if you need to add them, you can do so there. And then so in this case, we have done that. This is, again, just an estimate, so they're not going to be paying anything here unless you actually want to create a retainer invoice from this estimate. So again, this is something that you'll want to determine, does my business send out estimates at all? And if so, do we need some kind of upfront payment before we actually start work on this particular order? So if you do need to do that, you can click on this checkbox to create a retainer invoice, and you can collect a percentage of this estimate as your upfront payment. Yeah, it could be 100%, it could be 10%. Let's say we're doing 50% upfront payment. And you can actually see here, all of the different payment gateways that you've integrated will show up here. So in this case, we have just these two, but if you have authorized.net, if you have Forte or Stripe, you'll see what those are listed here. And you may have multiple payment integrations where you want to choose which one you want to make available to a customer. So let's say you only want them to pay through your ACH because it's a large order. You can uncheck some of these other ones and select that one if you have that integrated. That is an option for you to do so. If you don't want them to choose PayPal, you want them to do credit card, you can do that as well. Now, email too. So these are the different contacts that we have for this particular customer. It defaults to whoever the default contact is. If you need to send this to an additional contact, you can simply do so as well. Now we are going to go ahead and save and send this. And so you'll notice that it talks about an approval process. So I'll let you know, excuse me, what that approval process looks like, how to set it up. But we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And so this brings up the email kind of template that we've set up. So you can customize this template under the settings template section. You can also input placeholder fields. So it'll populate certain information. So it's like a variable. It has the estimate number here. And it also has this link that's been generated that's unique to this estimate. So it's basically a one-time portal. We'll copy this so we can kind of see what that looks like. We've also attached the estimate as a PDF. I'm going to go ahead and hit send. So now that estimate has gone off and can be seen by this customer. So whenever they open up their email and they take a look at that estimate, it's going to look like this. So this is an option for them to log in here, or they can actually just take a look at this estimate. We've already logged into the portal. That's why it's kind of showing me some of these other options that we have. But this estimate was just sent. Whoops, let's go back to that. And so they can view all the information that we've put here. And if they want to accept it, they can go ahead and accept it as well. Now, if you have sent out an estimate and it has a option for a retainer invoice, once they go ahead and make that payment, it's going to automatically create the retainer invoice and change the status of this estimate as approved. So it may be invoiced, if you manually convert this to an invoice, or you can actually set it up so that, let's say you're not collecting any kind of retainer, they're simply going to hit OK, we're good to go. And once they do that, you want to automatically create the invoice and either send it back to the customer or save it as a draft. You actually have the option to do that. If we go under Preferences and Invoices, Estimates, you'll see that there's a field here that says automatically convert an accepted estimate to an invoice. So in this case, I have yes, but I only want to create it as a draft. So I don't want to send it to the customer. I just want to save it in my system. You can put no, or you can actually say yes, I want it to be created and sent back to the customer automatically. So if you're really sure on the estimates that you send out, you can absolutely set that up if you'd like. So coming back to that estimate, you can manually convert this, and then there is a history of these trends of where this estimate's going to go that's listed here at the very top, including comments in the portal and things like that. I know Nathan has another poll question. I'm going to go ahead and let Nathan launch that.
Thanks. I was about to interrupt you. I just didn't know when.
I'm keeping an eye on time.
Yeah. So we're launching our 5th poll question, just to let everybody know. You should have answered 5 by now. If you didn't, make sure you go into the poll section and answer the ones that you missed.
Folks, that's for folks that really need CPE. I did have a question already that I answered. Somebody said, well, you're using these polling questions to profile us. Fair game. I understand why you would ask that. Seriously, I do. This world with privacy. But it has nothing to do with that. It's completely for continuing professional education for those on the webcast that need CPE credit. If you don't need CPE credit, you can either answer the questions just to play along or not. It really doesn't matter. We will not use those polling questions for any kind of targeting or anything like that. We will send you an email following this webcast with links and information, other stuff. Mm-hmm. We might send you an email link later with like a brochure for Zoho products, but we're not going to target you based on any of these questions.
Yeah, well, thanks for answering that, Val. Also, I try to make it fun, I guess, and just try to see what who our audience is. That's why there's specific questions to the webinar.
Well, and Val, one thing I wanted to mention is that Zoho's commitment to like no trackers and things like that is really based on external trackers, right? Of course, you've signed up for a Zoho application. Of course, we have your information. The point is that we don't use, let's say, Google trackers, where a third-party company would be able to see what you do. And then most of the time, what a lot of these companies do, especially if they have free applications, is they use that data and they somewhere in the terms of service, you'll see that they have the the option to actually
sell it,
sell
right?
that data. Right. And so that's really the big difference here. So in case of us being able to see, the questions you ask, we may send other specific Zoho emails to you because you're inside the Zoho ecosystem. But we safeguard your data from any information from outside the Zoho system. And that's really kind of the most important thing, because a lot of times you don't know where that's going to go.
Yeah, Zoho will absolutely not sell any data to any other company. I really admire their ownership for that. Zoho is privately owned. They're going to keep it that way. They're very committed to investing in the future and totally about privacy. Just we have to really, really watch what we do, even with marketing campaigns, as we'll have the privacy czar land on us and shut us down. So we're really big on all this stuff. Trust me.
Yeah. Polling question is done, Tali. You can continue.
All right. Thank you so much. So not to kind of belabor the point with estimates, but just wanted to show you kind of how the workflow starts. So the next point is you can kind of determine whether this is going to get converted directly to an invoice if you're using estimates again, or you may want to actually convert this to a sales order. So let's stop to talk about kind of the difference between a sales order and invoice real quick, because sometimes that trips up people. So sales orders are basically just a document that says a customer has placed this order for particular items or services. It does not actually accept any kind of payment. So a sales order basically just says that an order has been placed. So in this case, it's going to look almost identical, right? So if I'm manually creating this, I can do that. If I was coming from that same estimate that we just created, and I want to convert this to a sales order, so it wants this to be an accepted estimate. So I'll manually mark it as accepted. And it wanted to create the invoice as well. So it already brings over this information, and the invoice is now created if I want to go ahead and view that. Now, if I wanted to actually convert that, it would also convert. So real quick, the difference again between sales orders and invoice. So sales order is something you can use as a precursor to an invoice. Not everyone uses it. Not everyone has to use it. But there's a few use cases where it becomes really helpful. One of those use cases is, let's say a customer places an order. This is for inventory related, stuff that you might be selling. And let's say, they wanted to place an order where for some reason we're reselling LaCroix sparkling waters. And they wanted to place an order for 30 of these. You'll notice that we only have 20 on hand. And so we will actually have a back order with this. Let's say when we actually go ahead and try to fulfill this order, we're going to go ahead and actually ship the 20 that we have to them, or sell the 20 that we have to them. And that sales order will remain open, but we will create an invoice just for those 20. And so once we actually receive the back order that's been updated, we can create another invoice for the remaining 10 and deliver that to the customer, and the customer can pay for those at that time. So the sales order tracks all of those. It'll have multiple invoices, multiple payments. If you create an invoice, you can take a partial payment, but it can't be tracked in the same way as a per quantity that you've delivered. So let's say the total that they need to pay is $32.15 on an invoice. You can do a partial payment. You can enable partial payments where they just pay $20 of it now, but it's not going to track it in the sense of a per stock item tracking as this is. So that's one of the big differences. So if I take a look at one of these completed sales orders, you'll see that there's a status here for invoiced and whether that's been paid. This is a partially invoiced sales order. So let's take a look at that. So this sales order originally had a couple of different items, and we were only able to invoice 5 of them from the first order and 10 from the second. And there's also kind of a package option here. So if I take a look at invoices, I'll see that partial invoice for this total order. So this total order was $1,041, and the first invoice only billed $725. So this is one of the differences in terms of using sales orders and invoices. If you know you're going to have scenarios like this where you're going to need to track the different stages of this, definitely consider using a sales order. If you are using Zoho Inventory, you have to use sales orders. And that's because those cases may come up and the system will require you to use those. Otherwise, you can simply disable it, and you don't even have to use estimates if you don't want to. You can go straight to invoices. And again, a point of an invoice is that a payment will be received for this amount at the end of whenever this is billed. So that's a big difference between the two. All right, so now let's actually take a look here at the invoice module, because this is, of course, where most of you will spend your time. So I talked about price lists earlier. If you need to select if you need to manually select a price list, you can see that there's a price list option here. Simply select, that price list that we've created, and it'll change all of the different pricing for these different items. So you'll notice that this was a $149 base price. Because we have a 10% markdown, it's automatically applied that, and it's going to track it. It's going to be $134.10. It doesn't display it here in the discount option because this field displays these markdowns in the PDF. If you need to actually display this in the PDF, there's some different options to be able to do that. But just know that these fields are PDF displayed options, and there's a bunch of different reasons where you may not want to actually show the original price if it's like a wholesale discount, things like that. So down below, you'll notice that these are very, very similar to what we just took a look at. There was a question about terms and conditions and if customers were able to kind of comment on those. The terms and conditions you can set up as a default that are added to each transaction. Customers can't comment or change on any of the terms and conditions. One thing you can do, though, is that you can create something called a field update. So if some other criteria changes, if something particular happens, then you can update the information that's in the terms and conditions. So let's say that invoices like under a certain amount or over a certain amount, you don't, it's kind of like as is, no returns policy. You can actually set it up so that if, let's say the invoice is over, $1,000, you automatically input text into the terms and conditions that say this item is as is, no returns, no warranty, something like that. That's actually something you can do from the automation functions here in the automation module. So that's something you'll want to take a look at, and we'll briefly talk about that in just a minute. So I hope everyone kind of got a good sense of estimates, sales orders, and invoices. This is something that you're going to spend most of your time. But one thing I always recommend is when you're setting up your system, simply take a piece of paper down and write down exactly how you think a customer is going to move through your business. What does it look like? What do you want it to look like? That'll help you actually choose the different modules that are relevant to you. Now, a couple of the other options that are listed here. Payment links is kind of a newer module that we've added here that you can use. Payment links basically allow you to generate a payment link right away, receive payments to the customer before you actually invoice it. So there's a number of ways that this can be useful. It kind of depends on the business model. So one of the ways that this could be useful, as we talked about earlier, is accepting some sort of initial payment for services. This may be, let's say you offer some sort of initial evaluation. So let's say some accountants, they charge, let's say they charge $50 to have a 1-hour consultation. So instead of actually creating an invoice, sending it to the customer, this could be kind of difficult, is you can actually create a payment link. So for a particular customer, and simply send them this link, and it's going to be for that initial consult, and you can do that. Now, if you want a link that just lives in perpetuity, that's where you're going to want to use Zoho Checkout, where we talked about earlier, to actually create that link. It's going to have a hyperlink with a form that you can put on your website, or you can kind of place somewhere else. People can fill that out, and then that information will automatically be brought in as an invoice. So payment links is kind of an interesting concept, but basically collecting payment before an invoice. Again, you can disable this if you don't need to utilize it. Payments received. So payments received is something where either from the invoice module, you can say that you've received payment for an invoice. It's going to automatically be updated if they use one of the different payment gateways, or you can manually come here and select a customer. And when they have any kind of unpaid invoices, you'll see those charges listed here. I kind of just cleaned out the clutter from this account a little bit ago, so that's why a lot of these invoices are marked as paid. But you can choose multiple invoices that you need to mark as paid. Let's say they pay from a single check. This is the way that you'd want to actually, select multiple transactions, apply exactly where this money is going to. So whether they paid through check. Maybe this is going to go to undeposited funds initially, and then you're going to want to transfer that. This is where payments received goes to. Josh will talk about payments received and marking this in your imports when you're bringing in invoices, because this is something that if you were to export this module, it has all these relevant invoice numbers associated with a payment. So this is something that is important in your import process, that those invoices already exist, those numbers are already accurate, so that when you bring in payments into, let's say if you're doing a migration, you're gonna want to reflect exactly which invoices those are. So that's how it looks those up. And a couple last things here in the sales module is recurring invoices. So recurring invoices are basically like a really simple subscription. So Zoho subscriptions that I mentioned is kind of that full-blown subscription management, like Dollar Shave Club type thing. But let's say you want to actually have this particular kind of service. So it might be service-based companies can do this often, or even product-based companies. And you send this to a customer on some sort of subscription. You can actually do that through a recurring invoice. Now, this actually does allow you to charge automatically as well. So if you have under preferences here, you'll see that you can actually create, approve, charge, and send. So this will require you to use one of the payment gateways that allow for recurring billing, recurring payments. Not all of them let you do that. So if you have one of those, you can actually do a full-blown subscription where it'll actually charge them. And even on failure, so this is a dunning process, right? So if a payment is supposed to go through on the 5th, it fails for whatever reason, it sends a failure notification to the customer. After that, it'll try to recharge maybe after a day, or it's going to send some other notification. So you can actually set up a recurring invoice if you need here. This is, of course, different from Zoho subscriptions, where a customer actually goes in, selects a product like from your website, enrolls themselves in a subscription that way. Okay. And then last but not least, we have sales returns and credit notes. So sales returns are only here because that integration with Zoho Inventory. Credit notes are here because you can apply credit to a particular customer's account. So if this is some sort of refund that you need to issue, this is the way that you would be able to do that, by creating a credit note and then refunding that credit note. That's actually an option. Or you simply have store credit that they can apply later to an invoice. You'll notice that when you create an invoice for a customer, if they do actually have credits available, it'll notify you of those credits down below. So it'll, in this kind of yellow box, so in this case, it says we have some unbilled expenses you can charge this customer. You'll also notice that you have credits that you can apply to them here too. So I know Nathan has another poll question, and then we kind of enter the last part of this webinar.
Yeah, thank you, Tal. I'll go ahead and launch the 6th poll question. And if you could go ahead and go into the questions panel, Tal, and answer a few of those, I'd appreciate that.
Sure. All right. Give that a minute before I go ahead and.
Yeah, we're still here, folks. We're just, this gives Tala a second to breathe and look at the questions, because Nathan and I are answering as many as we can, but as a team, we'll try to get to these as best we can. We really appreciate your feedback, your questions, and we'll try to answer every one that we can here. So hang in there. Give us a few seconds on this.
All right. And just a quick comment that Christopher had. It's a really great comment, is instead of using a piece of paper, like I mentioned, for mapping your process, do Post-it notes, which is a great suggestion. So that way you can kind of move your Post-it notes around to know exactly what that process looks like. So thank you so much for suggesting that, Christopher. All right. So taking a look at some of the questions we have here.
One question we had, Tal, that I wasn't quite sure of, and I don't know if you know the answer about Showtime here, but the question was, once they get the recording later after the session, are they able to actually see the Q&A and the chat? I don't think they can, right?
No, in the recording, it's basically just a live recording. That's why I'm trying to project a lot of these questions so that they come up in that recording. But good question. All right, so we have a question from Liz about whether you can rename the title of sales orders. Yeah, so absolutely. So if you go into your settings field and go to templates, that's where you can change exactly what that document looks like. So Zoho Books is still going to call it sales orders on the left-hand side, but the document itself that goes out to a customer will be called whatever you want it to be called. So that's something you can do from templates. Are there price lists for purchases too? It's a question from Kiri. Yes. So when I was creating a price list, there's actually a selection for whether it's for sales or for purchases. So that's something that you can do there. We're going to take a look at kind of applying credit card payments. I'll show that in just a second. And here's a good question that we're going to answer probably on the third day. But if you assign contacts in Zoho CRM, who are the sales leads or customers in a particular billing category? So if you're using Zoho CRM, basically the contacts that are brought in, there's a default contact that's selected for that particular account. So this kind of goes into how you actually set up your list of customers, and in CRM we call them accounts and contacts. In Zoho Books we call them contacts and contact persons. And the reason for that is accounts kind of gets confused with chart of accounts. We're going to discuss this in detail in the CRM section on Thursday. So stay tuned for that. Alrighty. All right. So I want to jump back in because we have quite a bit more to cover and have about 15 minutes left. So on the purchases side, this is kind of a mirror image of what we talked about earlier for customers. But one thing I want to talk about is for vendors. If you have some vendor information that you have set up here, there is actually now a vendor portal. So this is a mirror equivalent to the customer portal. This is something that you may find useful for your business. If you do, this is something that you can absolutely set up and actually have a vendor portal where you can send purchase orders and receive invoices from a vendor and things like that. Expenses are just a really basic expense module that's set up here. So you can, of course, manually record most of these transactions, but a more useful way to do them is through your mobile app, right? So let's say you are out and about for your business, you buy something from, let's say, Home Depot, and I always recommend, you just snap a picture of the receipt right away, you enter the amount, and off you go. You don't have to really worry about it. If you use Zoho Expense, which is what tomorrow is going to go over in detail, this whole process is quite a bit different because Zoho Expense has a auto receipt scanning functionality. So that really allows you to just take a picture of a receipt. It'll automatically pull the amount from the picture. It'll pull the date, the currency, and it'll start categorizing transactions based on where you often go. So if you go to Home Depot and that's labeled as, let's say, office expenses or some other kind of category that you may have, it's going to reassociate those types of transactions based on the vendor information. That's the other field that it pulls is the vendor field. So that's inside of Zoho Expense if you're using that application. Inside the Zoho Books mobile app, there is some additional functionality, right? You may want to record mileage. This is something that you can do using a GPS as well. So you can simply hit start and stop on your iPhone or Android, or if you're using an Apple Watch, you can do that too. Or you can simply manually enter in the distance that you've traveled or the odometer reading. And then there's a bulk add expenses option here. Of course, you can also import expenses through a CSV if you need. Now, when you're attaching receipts, there's a few different places you can do this from. Obviously, you can do it from your computer and your phone, as I mentioned. There's also this feature that some folks really utilize it, some folks don't. It's called Documents. Documents is basically like an inbox inside of your Zoho Books account, and it's basically cloud storage that's exclusive for your accounting system. So this means you can upload receipts here if you need to. There is some auto scanning functionality here as well that you can take a look at. You can upload invoices. But another useful function of this, and a lot of the partners that I work with do this, is that they actually have their clients upload tax information, any kind of documentation, government expenses, maybe tax bills, things like that. They simply put them here into this folder. And that way, this is not something that's like a general, it's not a general cloud storage like you have like a Dropbox or a Google Drive. And it's also not something you're sending in an email where that can be compromised and forwarded. It's simply here inside of Zoho Books. And another function is you can actually create folders here inside of documents, and you can create permissions so that only certain users can access folders. So this is actually really secure. It's a really cool way to actually use this. And then if you have any kind of emails that you already have, let's say you received an email attachment for a receipt, you can simply forward it to this custom email address and it'll deposit that information here as well. So if you're creating expenses, you can associate them from documents or from another cloud storage. Something really cool to take a look at with documents there. Recurring expenses are exactly what you think they are. Simply setting up a recurring expense that repeats, and you can kind of see the life cycle of a recurring expense listed here. One of the useful functions of both expenses or recurring expenses is you can create billable expenses. So these expenses can be associated to a customer, and you can associate these to a reporting tag as well. Now, if you have any kind of projects for a customer, I can actually associate this expense to that project, or I can associate it to a potential. A potential is something that comes from CRM. We won't get into that until day 3, but just know that if you're using deals or potential in CRM, you can associate expenses there as well. And then being able to generate purchase orders and bills. So POs, of course, you can send these out to your vendor. Once those POs get accepted, you can simply convert these to a bill. And there's an option to do that here. For those folks who are using any kind of inventory management, bills are the point when you actually receive a purchase order, you can actually mark it as receives. That's when your item stock goes up, right? So that's when at the point of the bill, that's when your actual accounting stock has increased when you have paid for certain items. And then, so basically you have a accounting stock and a physical stock. So the accounting stock is when you paid for items and bills. When you create a purchase receive and you say, okay, we've actually physically received these items, that's when your physical stock increases. So you can track both of those for those folks with inventory management. Zoho Inventory does that quite a bit more detailed, but Zoho Books allows you to do quite a bit of it as well. And then finally, we have bills. So bills, the difference, of course, between expenses and bills are going to be for inventory-related purchases that increase your stock. If you don't do inventory, these are for like kind of long-term purchases. These are things that that really affect your accounts payable. If you have any kind of long-term things that aren't going to be due right away, they might be due in a month or 6 months. A bill is exactly where you're going to create those. We also have some really cool functions for bills where you can pay by ACH. So we have an integration with Forte for bill payment. So you can pay a vendor using ACH. And you can also pay via check. So you can order checks. This information is all in the help documentation, but you can actually order custom checks that can be printed. And so you can set up a template and you can simply print these checks instead of having to manually write them. So if you still are doing check printing, you can absolutely do that under bills and payments made. And then vendor credits are exactly what they seem. If you need to record any of your own credits with the vendor, you can do so. Next time you create a purchase order and a bill, it'll actually notify you of those. Now, moving on to projects real quick. So projects are really where you're going to spend a lot of time creating these kind of custom billable kind of service requests for customers. So you have a few different options here for billing methods. So the first billing method is fixed cost for a project. You also have project based on the entire, the billing based on the entire project hours, or individual tasks or staff hours. So if I have, let's say, based on task hours, I'm going to have the ability to create multiple tasks here with different hourly rates per task. Or if it's based on staff hours, I can have it based on different staff members that I may select here. And these staff members have different hourly rates. So once they record hours for this project, they are going to be billed at whatever rates you put in there. We also have some really simple project budgets that you can do on a per hour basis. So for the entire task, I may say I expect this task to take 15 hours, and then I can run a budget versus actual report at a later point in time. So it's a very simple module. It's not designed to be a full-fledged project management system. That is Zoho Projects. Zoho Projects is something that integrates here into Zoho Books. if you are using Zoho Projects, that's where you're going to have Gantt charts and milestones and all the other very detailed project-oriented requirements. You can then build those project hours here in Zoho Books if you need to, and you can set that up under integrations. So that is under projects there. Now, one of the more useful functions here inside projects is client approvals. So client approvals are really helpful because you may need to get a customer to actually say okay before you build them. I know certain customers that do this for staffing service. This is really a great way to do that under client approvals. Once those are approved, you can simply create an invoice based on those client approvals. So that kind of brings us to some of the main modules. As I mentioned, Josh is going to kind of go in detail on some of the, basically all the modules that are specific to migration. So I'm going to let him kind of focus on the accountant side, chart of accounts, and things like that. But before we end, I wanted to show you a few really important features inside Zoho Books that I just want you to kind of think of. So one of those is if we go into settings and we take a look at reporting tags, this is what I talked about earlier. So reporting tags are those classes that are going to be relevant to your particular business. You may want to create some sort of categories. So there's a limit of 10 tags that I have here, but there's a very soft limit on individual categories within those tags. So if I were to go into a report, I can actually filter based on those tags. So I can go to report, hit customize, and under filters, I'll see I have these tags that I've created here. And that way I can run a particular report based on a tag. So simply run a report and see how much comes there. I can compare it to other reports, export this as needed. So that is under reporting tags. Taxes, very simply. So you can of course add tax rates and tax groups here. These are kind of something you would add manually. Then you can associate those tax rates or tax groups to particular items, to particular customers. But if you are doing any kind of sales tax with Nexus in multiple states, we have an integration with Avalara. Avalara is a company that basically automatically calculates sales tax based on the billing address of the customer. That way you don't have to worry about calculating tax rates. You can actually take a look, find more information about the Avalara integration. It's a really interesting company, really cool service, definitely useful for those businesses that are selling in multiple states. We've done entire webinars on them. Val is a huge proponent of Avalara. So just wanted to mention that real quick. And then finally, this is something that I mentioned again, we're going to go in detail later on is automation. That's going to be on the third day. But what I want to talk about lastly is the payment gateways that we have here. So the payment gateways that we have here are, there's 12 different payment gateways. You can set these up. Zoho doesn't charge anything for these payment gateways. They have their own charges, right? So if you look at a payment gateway, they have different types of transaction fees. Most credit cards are going to be something like 2.9% plus 30 cents. If you're doing e-checks, right, ACH, Authorize.net has their own fees. I believe it's something like 50 cents a transaction. And then I talked about Forte, which is a regular payment gateway, but we also have them for ACH payments to vendors. So that's really important. So once you set up any of these payment gateways and you come here into the banking module, what you want to see here is that based on your different payment gateway, you may have some kind of clearing account or holding account. So in this case, we have a WePay account. This is transactions that are being kind of cleared through WePay before you receive them. Now, once your credit card service actually deposits your money into your bank account, what's going to happen is that you're going to want to take a look at that account and view the uncategorized transactions. So in this case, I simply have withdrawals here, but you'll have a bunch of deposits from different customers. And what you'll want to do is Zoho Books tries to recognize these transactions and match them for you. So in this case, there aren't any matching transactions. But if I was to have, let's say, an outstanding invoice and it matches the same date range as well as amount as a deposit that I received, it'll bring up that possible match and allow me to actually select that match and categorize it. And then let's say that transaction in this case is an expense. It hasn't been recorded. I can simply add the expense from here. So the banking module is quite detailed, something you definitely want to get some practice on, view the help documentation. because you can do reconciliations here. Definitely suggest kind of if you're working with a bookkeeper, an accountant, something to kind of let them walk you through this or let them kind of handle this. But being able to actually put in a closing balance for a period and go ahead and clear transactions while referencing your bank statement is very, very important. A really critical part. So the banking module is quite detailed, but it really depends on whether you're going to go into this. It can be for credit cards, it can be for checking accounts, really any kind of accounts that you have listed here. When you're adding a bank or credit card, you can simply log into your bank account and it'll automatically bring in those transactions. Unfortunately, sometimes depending on your bank, these links sometimes can break. You can refresh them. If you do have, there's thousands of banks listed here, even small credit unions. But if you do have an account that's not listed, you can actually enter it manually, and then you can import statements if you'd like through, there's a bunch of different formats for statements. But definitely most banks and credit unions and things like that are listed there. So we've gone through a ton of different functions inside of Zoho Books. I have purposely kind of skipped over a few of them, like the accountant module, because Josh is going to take a look at those. But real quick, I want to just reference our agenda real quick. I went over a little bit on time, so I apologize for that. But we're going to take a quick break. And in about 5 minutes, we're going to come back, and Josh is going to go ahead and get us started off with migrating accounting systems. So I'll still be here. I'm going to still be looking at the questions panel. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and put those in. But let's take. All right, everyone. I apologize. That was probably too short of a break, but fortunately, we have got to get going. But we do have a very, very good session on migrating accounting systems presented by Josh. Josh, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Josh, were you able to eat lunch during the last session?
I did a little bit. I actually really enjoyed it.
Nice.
I had to make sure that I heard all the specific points that you were saying that I might mention in my session. So
I appreciate you kind of picking up where I'm dropping that off. So I am going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce you real quick, and then I'll hand over the session to you.
Hey, Tal, before we get started, I just want to launch the 8th poll question just so
for sure
we're on schedule.
I appreciate you keeping an eye on those. I am usually not so keen on launching them because I forget, and then I launch like 5 at once.
Yeah, sometimes it can get a little overwhelming. And
as we mentioned at the beginning, we'll include a link for the survey at the end of Josh's session. So be on the lookout for that in the chat as we update that. And as you have questions for Josh, please go ahead and put those in the questions panel, and we'll try to get those. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Josh Bleznick. Josh has been a Zoho partner for about a little over about 5 years, I think now, right, Josh?
Yeah.
And in that time, Josh and I have got a great relationship. We've met a bunch of times. He is based out of New York City, and he works for Presti & Naegeli, where he is a accounting technology implementation specialist. I kind of just made that up, but Josh will do a good job explaining what he does and what Presti & Naegeli do. So Josh, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Tala, and I'm very happy to be here. I just want to apologize. I'm getting over being sick from last week, so my voice sounds a little raspy, but I'm going to try my best to, pump through. So if you hear a little raspiness, that's why. So as Tala said, I am a consultant at Presti & Naegeli here in New York City, and we are a full-fledged accounting firm focusing in audit and tax. And we also have a technology division where we implement, migrate, convert accounting systems for small to mid-size to large businesses as well. And my specialty within the Zoho world has been migrating other systems to Zoho Books, implementations, migrations, and setup, and helping out CRM consultants through setting up Zoho Books with the CRM component as well. So just to give a little background of Pressley Nagley, Pressley Nagley's been in business since 1982. We're a mid-size accounting firm in New York City. Like I said, specializing in audit and tax and helping clients with anything that they need, especially during the pandemic. And the consulting side, which is very unique to Presty Nagley, is since we're an arm of the firm, we're also have resources through other CPAs and other accounting, tax preparation, financial statements, etc., through the firm. So if there's anything that a client needs besides an implementation in Zoho Books setup, we also have all accounting resources through, across the board. So today I'm very excited because we're going to be speaking about migrating accounting systems, how to set up Zoho Books, what is the best options, the workflow through it, and to show you some tips and tricks throughout within Zoho Books, as well as how to create import sheets, and what is the proper way, and some guidelines when trying to do this yourself, and or when reaching out to a consultant to make sure that they're doing it right as well. So to jump in and get started with this, I know Tala gave a really beautiful demo and understanding of what Zoho Books is capable of. But right now, the main mission is to discuss the migration path, what that means, and what we need to accomplish that. So within the migration path, there is roughly 9 steps. The first step to pay attention is custom integrations. Somebody who, and I'm going to use this term loosely, a legacy system, which is your historic system after migration. Let's say you're using QuickBooks or Peachtree, and we're moving to Zoho Books, or even Xero. And there are a lot of third-party custom integrations that companies use for payroll. Avalara as one of them for sales tax. There could be timesheet integrations, accounts receivable, accounts payable integrations, etc. So the main focus and why that's number one is to make sure whatever integrations you have or third-party apps you're currently using with your system, can they be used with Zoho Books? And if not, what is the alternative? And if there is an alternative, I'm sure that there's more features that you would like out of your system that you currently don't have. The next one is to choose a defined cutoff date. Typically, a cutoff date is at the end of a month, or it could be at the end of the year, end of a quarter, and the cutoff date is really when you're going to be cutting off from your legacy system, moving into your new system, Zoho Books. The third thing is a clean legacy system, and that is whatever system you're moving from, to make sure all the bank accounts are reconciled, all customers, vendor lists, items, etc., that are inactive or not used are deactivated, so that when we're pulling the data, or whoever's pulling the data, they'll get clean list data, and to make sure that you have full good numbers to be able to tie back from your old system to the new system after migration. The fourth one, which is my favorite one, and this is something that I deal with clients a lot during setup and implementation processes, and make sure that they clearly understand, is your chart of accounts implementation. And like Tala mentioned, because I was keeping track of what he was saying, hopefully, I would mention this in my session. So one of the main things within chart of accounts that we're going to dive real deep into is how to set it up, what is the proper way, and what we can do to make sure there's no holes in our accounting and what the business owner really needs, or needs to view while using their chart of accounts. The fifth one is the list data, which I mentioned before, that ties in with the clean legacy system. Then we have open balances, open transactions, which are typically accounts receivable transactions, open invoices, open bills that need to be entered in the system. And then afterwards, we're ready to migrate our data, reconcile both systems, and then go live. So that is the quick path of how to migrate, and obviously we'll go in deeper and show a demo shortly. So these are a few types of integrations that are used, which was the first item on the list: payroll, inventory management, CRM, online payment solutions, AP, AR, 1099 software, Office 365, and other applications. And something that Tala went through during his session is that, with CRM and all these other applications, Zoho has a solution for, and sometimes, like Val mentioned, going to the Zoho website could be overwhelming, but there's so many applications and all these integrations are within one platform, one environment, and one ecosystem. So being more familiar and being part of this ecosystem gives you all of these types of integrations and options for your business. So the next one is the cutoff date, which I spoke about briefly, but as mentioned, it is either a end of a year, a quarter, and you want to give yourself enough time for the transition, so all employees and everybody would understand and know what's going to be implemented and new features that you would like to have when using the new system. The other thing is that one of the things that we try as a firm to do is to limit downtime during the cutoff date. So as an example, I'm doing 5 migrations now, but one of the ones that I'm doing is due to launch in 2 weeks on 12/31/2020. And what'll happen is I will have all the data put in as of November. And then after November, once we hit January and the December books are closed in their legacy system, we then will move over that 1 month of activity into Zoho Books during a weekend or during the first week of January to make sure that there is no downtime and all the data is in there and everything reconciles up to date. So the other thing is to be able to scrub your old data and to make sure that all your lists are clean. There's no duplicate names. There's no customer names that are no longer active. Same thing with vendors, not to inactivate old employees, products and services that are offered. We want to make sure those are accurate. Any additional tags or transactions, and like we mentioned, the chart of accounts. Now, the reason why this is so crucial to be able to scrub the old data is, for me as a consultant, when you hand me a pile, your QuickBooks or your Peachtree or Xero, etc., and say, "Hey, we're moving into Zoho Books," I go through each individual list data, from your customer list to your vendor list, and all the transactions during that time period, to make sure that they look clean, that there's no negative numbers that don't make sense or anything like that. So if this is scrubbed beforehand and we're dealing with clean data, it makes the transition process easier. Okay, so now that we discussed what it means to migrate, what do we need to actually do the migration, and we understand the cutoff date. Now it's time to look at what you actually need during this conversion. And there are on the screen 2 types of conversions, but there's really 3. And I'm going to walk you through them because depending on your company and what you need through that will, depends on the amount of data you need to bring over. So the first one is the full data migration. The full data migration is bringing over all this data and all transactions from the beginning of time. Typically, we recommend 3 years at the maximum, but that definitely changes with the client. I've done a 14-year migration and I've done a 25-year migration. So depending on what you need, it'll bring all data, including all transactions for each individual transaction type, as well as all the list data. Now, the partial migration, there's really 2 options. The partial migration is we would pick a time span in between 3 to 5 years, excuse me, and bring in data for that time period with transactional data. The other part is a list migration where we would just bring in list data with no transactions and you would be able to start fresh. And a lot of companies, especially starting a new year, and there's a lot of issues with their accounting, want to do that because it makes it easier and beneficial for them to be able to fill the holes that they've had and the struggles that they've had in the past year or so or longer. And this gives them the opportunity to do that. Excuse me. So now we're here at the migration path, and this just outlines the lists, what the lists are, as well as what would be the open transactions and the open balances. Now, if you notice during the second option, open balances, says control reports. One of the main things during the migration process is to make sure that we have a P&L and a balance sheet and a trial balance of ending numbers from the legacy system to be able to reconcile and tie back to after the migration is complete. So now we're going to jump into the demo. I'm not so good at Tala for keeping track of when the poll questions are launched.
Yeah, Josh, right now I was going to launch it right before you went to the demo, and I appreciate you pointing that out.
No problem.
So really the question is just, have you ever migrated an accounting system before? And most likely the people staying for this session, they haven't, or they've only done it a few times. So you'll definitely learn a lot from Josh. He's done these sessions before and gives a good insight, definitely because he's in the industry and he knows what's happening in the weeds.
Awesome.
Give it about 10 more seconds and then you can continue, Josh, okay?
Sounds good.
Awesome, awesome.
All right. So obviously we'll share my information again. And I'm going to jump into a screen share in a second. But this is my email address. Feel free to contact me or reach out to me. We'll be happy to answer any of your questions about migrating and/or assist. Obviously, we'll post my information again, but this was the last slide that I jumped to. So now, going into the demo, which is very exciting. Okay. Can everybody see my Zoho Books okay?
Yes, we can, Josh.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Nathan. So here we are in Zoho Books, and the first place this is my test company for Presti and Egley. There's not that much data in here, and I know Tala walked us through the dashboard and different parts in Zoho Books and the preferences and how to set it up. So after we set up the basics, the first part of migration to make sure everything comes over smoothly is our chart of accounts. Now, if you click on the accountant tab on the left and we go here to chart of accounts, we'll be able to see the chart of accounts listed here. Now, if you notice, there are a lot of accounts on the left that are pre-made accounts when going through the survey and creating your Zoho Books account from scratch. A lot of these are predefined accounts that are needed, but we would like to put in our accounts here and be able to look at it. Now, when importing data in Zoho Books, and we will go through this at length, under the settings icon, under the gear icon, under any type of module, if it's sales, under invoices, there's an import function. And if we click on import chart of accounts, you'll see here that there is a sample file that Zoho gives us outlining what specifically is the way that the Excel sheet should be set up and what are the items that we need there. Now, I personally have this saved, so I'm going to go to my documents and open up my Zoho. Hold on one second. Okay, see what's in my desktop. Here we go. And this is my Zoho templates. Now, these are templates for all the transaction types that we have, and we're going to open up the chart of accounts and take a look at this. Now, I apologize that I have other windows open, and I just closed it. So this is our chart of accounts mapping sheet. And if you look here, we have the account name, the account code, the description, the account type, parent account, account number, currency, open balance, and if it's a debit or a credit. Now, depending on the type of migration it is, will determine if we want to put in a open balance when we actually import the chart of accounts. And the reason why I'm saying that is if we're putting in transactional history in the account, we might not need to put in an opening balance because we might journalize a trial balance from a previous year or put in opening balances in a different way. Typically, what happens when you use an open balance entry, if, let's say, as an example, this wage payable account, which is 1,000 and it's a credit, the debit on the other side from an accounting perspective goes to open balance equity. And open balance equity, when you first set up your books, is a depository for the other side of all entries that are going to be booked for open balances. Now, a lot of accountants always wonder why, because that open balance sits there for such a long time and why it's sitting there, and is there a way to avoid it? And there is. And typically the way that I handle that is by either for a summary migration to be able to enter in the opening balances via a journal entry and journalize an entire trial balance, and or if you have the transactions in there, the transactions will take care of the opening balance. So now that we look at this sheet, the one thing that I just want to point out, which is the most important thing, is these headers. Now, the thing about the headers is that in Zoho Books, after we finish the our sheet and we're ready to import, we want to make sure that all the headers on the sheet are correct. And the reason why is that when you do the mapping and your headers match what Zoho Books requires, it will automatically map that for you. And I'm just going to quickly go to Zoho Books and show you that if you choose a file here, and we're going to design a sheet together, and we'll go through this. If we go to our desktop and go to Zoho templates, and we'll go to our chart of accounts, and we'll open that there, and we're going to go to the bottom and click next. Okay. Now, if you look here, this is the sheet. This is the mapping portion of Zoho Books for the chart of accounts. And if you see on the left, these are all the fields that are needed. The ones in red and starred are required, such as the account name, the account type. That's it. And then we have other fields there as well. So the account code, description, mileage rate, mileage unit, account number, currency, parent, open balance, debit and credit. And if you notice, the account name, account code, and account type already pre-populated in the import file header section to what the Zoho Books field is. And it makes importing a lot faster and a lot easier if you don't have to map each time. So here we're going to use the chart of accounts as an example. Obviously, we'll walk through other modules of how to import as well, but I do want to go through a chart of accounts together and show you how I would create the import sheet and how that would work. Now, here is a landscaping company, which is a test company from QuickBooks, and I exported the chart of accounts in Excel and have this as our example. Now, if you see here, here's the account, here's the type, here's the detail type, description, and balance. Now, the first thing that I want to point out is, and from previous webinars, and Val can definitely speak on this, it's very important to keep track of what you're doing to modify your spreadsheets to be able to do this. So one of the tips and tricks that I have is here we're going to create a folder, and we're going to call this chart of accounts, and I have it open, but that's where it's going to be. And we're going to start this. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to name this tag, this sheet original. Sorry, on Tuesday morning I have trouble spelling. And then we're going to create a modified sheet. And this modified sheet is what we're going to use to modify this specific sheet to import. And if you notice here, we're going to just, quickly delete these columns and have this here. Now, the main thing that QuickBooks does, as well as other systems do, is typically other systems separate parent and child relationship accounts with a colon. Now, if you notice here, and I'm just going to move up the spreadsheet a little bit, these are all parent-child accounts. And if you notice, there's landscaping services, colon, job materials. So to create this sheet for import, we would have to create another column called parent account, where we would split that out. And after we split these out, knowing that these are landscaping, and we can go through this entirely, but just to show you quickly, after we split these out, here is some more sub accounts as well, and job expenses, etc. Is we need to make sure that our account names match QuickBooks, match Zoho Books. And from QuickBooks, some of the account types are not the same. So the best way of doing that is if we go here in Zoho Books and we go into our chart of accounts, we are going to go into new account, and we're going to look at the account type list. And here on the account type list, we see bank, okay. There's other current asset, other current liability, long-term liability, income, expense, other income, other expense. So if we go into our mapping, our sheet for import, you notice that this is long-term liability, not liabilities. Liability, etc. Just fix this one also. And then if we go down to our expenses, in Zoho, they're called expense, not expenses. So we can do this and copy this down. And be able to have all of that. Now, once we completely edit the sheet, and the sheet is ready for import, and I'm going to take just some of these accounts. We're going to use just the balance sheet for import. We're then going to create another tab called import, which is going to be our full-fledged import sheet. Unfortunately, I pasted it below. So we're going to go here, paste that there, and we're going to call this import. Now, currently, Zoho Books uses CSV files for importing. So after we have the original modified and import, this is our master sheet that we're going to be using for all our imports for chart of accounts, and to be able to reference and go back and use it to see what we changed and what we didn't change. And the main reason why we do it this way and keep an original modified and import sheet is that when you're moving to a new account, new system, there's a lot of changes that we can make. We can create new income accounts. We can look at different expenses. We can modify parent-child relationships. Your company might have new reporting functionality that's needed, and it's a good way to do that. And this is the best way of tracking it. So
Josh, I toss up one thing here, folks. What he's showing you, folks, is proper procedure in case something goes wrong. Migrations are always, I don't care who you've got going, who's doing it, they're always frustrating. And the last thing you want to do is have Humpty Dumpty fall off the wall. So you got to be able to put the pieces back together again. Josh is showing you an excellent example of chart of accounts here, how you could go back to the base chart, figure out what you modified, and figure out what you imported. Mm-hmm. You got to do that with everything. Everything's got to have the base pieces in place in case you've got to put stuff back together. So this is a very important step, Josh. Thank you. Keep going, bud. Sorry.
Yeah, hey, Josh, I need to go ahead and launch.
Feel free to jump in whenever. Excuse me. Okay.
Josh, I'm going to go and launch a polling question real quick.
Sure.
And also, if everyone goes to the handout section, you will see a migration template folder, and this has all the templates for the imports in there as well. It's just helpful to have that kind of up so you can go ahead and get everything ready before you start trying to migrate. Okay, we'll give this about 15 more seconds. All right, Josh?
Sounds good.
And to let you know, the polling question was, what about migration worries you? And importing accurate information is at 55%. So basically, really what Josh is going over right now and kind of what Val said is it's good to have a way to reconcile your imports and audit it later if you need to. If you notice something's wrong, you can kind of go back and see where it went wrong rather than redoing the entire import again.
For sure. And one of the things that I just want to point out while we're having the discussion, while the poll's still going on, I'm guessing.
You can go ahead and continue, but you can finish that comment.
Awesome. Is I once was assisting on a migration probably about 5 months ago, and someone tried importing 100,000 lines of estimates and realized that the exchange rate was incorrect. And after having 100,000 estimates in the system, they had to go in and modify that. So, you know, a lot of the sheets and stuff that I'm showing you is also something that we do to show the client. So like I mentioned, I'm working on 5 migration projects as we speak, and some of them are finishing within the week. And what I do is after I scrub and pull all the data in Excel and look through it and have that import sheet, I like to show it to my clients for approval and sign off and making sure that they understand. So now that we have this modified, we're going to need to copy this into a different Excel file because it needs to be saved in CSV for import. Now, one of the things also that I just want to mention after we, and I'll talk about it in more detail, is account codes and account numbering and how that can help you with your chart of accounts. And a lot of companies do not have that functionality and or do they use it, but it could be very helpful. So just a taste of what to come. So now that we have this, we're going to look at our headers. We can copy, you know, our headers over to our other sheet and get this ready for import. So we are going to just shift this over and drop. Let's see. No, shift cells to the left. Okay, that didn't work. But we're going to then just put account name here. So what we could do is we could add another column, and we're going to put account name, account type, and parent account, account number, currency, open balance, etc. Okay. So now we can delete this, and we're going to delete this row. Now we have a sheet for import. All right. So we're going to just copy this into a new sheet. And now that we have this, we're going to just take out these 2 columns, and we're going to save this as CSV. Save as my desktop, my Zoho templates, and import sheet chart of accounts. Okay. So now if we go back into Zoho Books, here we can go into import. We're going to go into import chart of accounts. I'm going to choose file. We're going to choose the file that I just made, which is the import sheet for chart of accounts. And we're going to go down here, press next. Now, not all modules have this, but if you notice, there's a duplicate handling section. And this section is to be able to skip or override current accounts that are already made. So if you have an account with the same name and it has a different account code or there's something specific to it, we can override the current information that's there and be able to change it. Or we could just skip that and be able to have new info. So we go into net. I think I forgot to save it as CSV. Okay, so if you notice, there's an error that popped up saying that Excel is not supported. And we're going to go back in here. We're going to save. I'm going to save this as CSV and press save. Okay, now we're good to go. Now, one of the things also is that to note is that because CSV does not have a multiple tab functionality, you can only have one sheet per tab. We need to make sure that we save our master sheet, which has all of our changes, modified, import, and edits. And then, we have that. So I'm going to use the sample file because there's a header that is not there. So we're going to go into the chart of accounts and we're going to press next. Here we have our account name. Our account type is filled out. And we're going to press next. Now, once you press next on any import functionality, it's going to show you the amount of records that are on the sheet, and then number of records skipped. Now, if there is any errors or issues or anything like that, it will show up here. Since they are 0, we are good to import. And all our information is there, and we can check the accounts that are here. The second thing, and I'm going to import another sheet with errors purposely to show you a couple of things. So if we just delete this, and we're going to delete these headers also. Now this is actually, let's do it from here. Okay, so we're going to copy this into a new sheet. And this is our chart of accounts from QuickBooks that we did not edit really. Some of the account types are incorrect. We did fix the expense from expenses, but there's also ones that have colons in here. And we didn't really go through this so clear to make sure everything matches and looks correct. As an example, QuickBooks calls fixed assets, and Zoho Books calls it fixed asset without the S. So we're going to use this as an example and show you. Now, if we save this, we're going to make sure we save this as a CSV during the first run through. And we're going to save this in my desktop. Zoho templates, sample data, okay. And chart of accounts, import 2. Now, if we go back into Zoho Books and click on new account, go into import. And I don't know, let's just make sure I save this as CSV because I did promise that we wouldn't do this a second round. So we're going to click on CSV. There we go. So now I can keep my promise. Okay. and we're going to go to choose file. We're going to go into sample data, and we're going to click on the CSV, which is the first one. Okay. And we're going to click next. Now, we're going to choose, because we didn't map this properly, we're going to choose what our correct header is for what is required here. So we have our account is our account name, and our type is account type. Okay. And now we're going to press next. Now it's computing, and there are 78 line items on this sheet, and there are 14 records that are coming back with issues. And I just want to walk you through a little bit, because this is a major part of being able to understand these errors, what the errors mean, and also how to correct them on your import sheets. So if you notice here, there are 3 columns within here, and we are able to use this to go back to our import sheet and review. So column 5, inventory asset, already exists within Zoho. So we can't import that because we were skipping duplicates, and it's not going to import something that already exists. Now, if we change that setting in the beginning under configure to override, we won't have that issue, and it will go through no problem. Now, if you notice, which I did correctly, or did this purposely, is that here is the type. And under line 9, 10, 11, and 12, these are types. The value in the field does not match the data type supported by us. And that is because fixed assets has an S. Liabilities is liabilities and not liability. So a quick, good tip that I actually figured out that I want to share with you guys, that a lot of support technicians and stuff like that, when you're dealing with large lists of data, to be able to look at what is the issue, this is how you would do it. So if we go back to our import 2, and this might sound obvious, but I think it's a very cool tip and trick, and I would love to hear after I finish showing from Val and Nathan their opinion, as well as Tala. But if we put in a column here called row columns, and we're going to number this correctly to the row actual number, and bring this down. Now, if we take a notepad and go into Zoho Books, and this is one of my favorite tips and tricks, and it honestly really works, and it's helpful, especially when you're doing 100,000 or 20,000 transactions. You copy and paste this into Notepad. It's going to outline this here, and it separates it by column. So if you then take it out of Notepad and put it into Excel, and we're going to put this on another tab, it's going to have all of our error messages here, and we can put a quick header, row column, we'll just call this row call, and we'll call this type and error message. So what's a good way of tracking this, which is more of an Excel trick, but is good to know, is if you do a VLOOKUP to this this sheet, and we go back in here, I think I I selected the wrong. Quick. Come on.
Hey, Josh, while you're figuring that out, I'm going to go ahead and launch the third, well, not the third, but your third polling question.
Okay.
And I am seeing what you're doing, and it does help out a lot to kind of have those columns in there just because you're able to quickly and efficiently, like you're saying, do that VLOOKUP and see what matches or doesn't match.
Yes. So I'll wait for the polling question to finish, and
yeah,
then we'll resume momentarily.
While you're looking at your polling question, Josh, that was a question in the questions area that's I thought I'd bring it up to everyone. The question was, what's the average number of hours needed to migrate to Zoho Books from another accounting system? And I know that's really variable depending on the accounting system, but if you have any general guidance, I think that's what they're looking for.
Sure. So the quick and easy answer is that it really depends on the amount of data. Our projects tend from 20 to 100 hours and could exceed 100, but typically they're between 20 to 100 hours of time. And the real way of knowing that is knowing how many years you want to bring across, the amount of data for each year, so how many invoices, how many bills, how many bill payments, etc., and how many types of transactions. If inventory and payroll is involved, it definitely gets a little trickier. But those are typically the three telling signs of how long it will take.
Thanks, Josh. I will let you know the polling question is done so you can continue.
Okay, awesome. So quickly, I just ran the VLOOKUP and got it to work because I selected the wrong field. But if you notice here, I did a lookup from our error codes to our import sheet. Because what happens is a lot of people, especially if you're doing this yourself, will go, "Oh, I got 14 errors. Big deal. Not such a big deal. At a 78 chart of accounts, only 14 are not going to import. Okay, let's import." We just imported it. Sorry, 78 out of 92. We just imported them. We're good to go. And then all of a sudden, a couple weeks later, you're like, "Oh, poop. What happened to some of my accounts? They're missing. I have no idea where they are. What am I gonna do?" So if you do this, you have a column of all of the error messages for those specific accounts. And we know that there's 14 of them. So if we just add a filter in Excel and take out everything that's not NA, as well as blank, and these are error messages. These are exactly, there's 12, but these are exactly the fields and accounts that we missed during our import. And I always like to do this if I go back to imports later, depending on the time and the client. Sometimes you just import everything and you go back later, and if you keep a clear record of all your error logs, you're able to go back fairly quickly without going through each type of transaction and checking what's going on. Okay, so I hope that makes sense, and we'll move along a little bit into some other modules. So here, after we have our chart of accounts set up and everything looks good, we go through it, we make sure all the accounts are here. Now we need to finish our list data. And our list data will start with customers and vendors. So if we go here in sales, we'll click on customers, and here it will show all our customer information. Now, obviously, there are customers in here already. One of them, being Bruce Wayne. I hope everybody knows who Bruce Wayne is. He is the CEO of Wayne Enterprises and also known as Batman. But besides that, we are looking through this list and we see that there's name, company name, email, work phone, and if there's any receivables here. So if we go to the gear icon, if we go to the hamburger icon and we go to import customers, it will give us the similar sheet that we had before with chart of accounts. Now here it's asking us if we're importing customers or customer contact persons, and we're going to be importing just customers. So if you notice here, we have the skip and override option as well, which typically shows up on list data, but not transactional data. And we have a sample CSV file as well. So if we just quickly go into our customers, here's the customer template. And this outlines all the information that we need, which would be the customer name, display name, company name, salutation, first name, last name, email, as well as other information such as website, notes, contact address, billing addresses, shipping addresses, and if there's any custom fields that you need for your customer. Now, typically, when doing this, we want to make sure we have all our custom fields outlined beforehand, and those could typically be customer types. Let's say you run a business where you have customer type A and customer type B, and you want to be able to display that within the customer screen. You can add a field for that. If you have want to keep track of archived customers and non-archived customers and show that as a type, you can do that as well. And a lot of people use customer types for price lists or any type of transactional data that's needed by targeting or tagging that customer as a specific type. So before we do this, we're going to look at my customer list quickly of what I exported from my QuickBooks file. Now, this is my QuickBooks customer list that has my customer, a phone number, email, full name, billing address, and shipping address. So if you notice, as an example, in the template, billing address is split up into different fields. There is billing address, billing city, billing state, billing country. And in my sheet that we got from our legacy system has it all in one space. So we could either re-pull the data or split that up depending on how many customers there are and using other Excel functions to do that. And the same way that I showed before, we would have a import sheet, a modified sheet, a original sheet, a modified sheet, and then an import sheet. And then this goes with doing your vendors, customers, vendors as well. So this methodology works for all types of list data. Okay, and then after we have our sheet fully created, we will go in here, choose file, and then import. So after we have all our list data imported, chart of accounts, customers, vendors, we could also look at our items, and our items are used for detail for invoices, and we can import these as well by going to the burger icon and going to import items, and going through the types of items that we have and making sure that they're correct. After customers, vendor, chart of accounts, customers, vendors, and items are in, we feel good with the list data. We make sure that they're all correct. Now we can start entering in our transactions. So there is an order of doing transactions. And as an example, which sounds obvious, but people do things in unobvious ways sometimes. If you can't import payments to invoices without importing the invoices first. You can't import bill payments without having the bills, and so on. So if you're a company that uses estimates and sales orders, and those estimates are then converted into invoices, we would want to have those estimates in first. Typically, just to comment, estimates, purchase orders are not posting transactions. Estimates are transactions that are in the system until it becomes a monetary transaction, such as an invoice. So, if those are converted, we would want those in the system at first to make sure we have all the data there. So let's look at our invoices for a second. So here I have 2 invoices in the system. And if we go into our burger icon, we click on import invoices, it's going to take us to this menu. And let's look at the sample sheet to see what is required for invoice imports. So here we have our invoice template. Okay. And this lays out the invoice date, the number, if there's an estimate number associated to that invoice, just like I mentioned earlier. What is the invoice status? Now, Zoho has a invoice status that a lot of systems do not have, in the sense that you can draft an invoice, wait for approval, and then it could be sent out to your customer. Now, we can move all invoices in draft to sent, and once we import payments to that, those invoices then will be changed from draft to sent out. So that is something not to be alarmed while going through this process. Customer name, due date, purchase order, if there's a purchase order attached, a template. A lot of companies, just like Tala mentioned, have different types of templates, and you can set them up. So whatever, if you have, let's say, 3 different streams or entities of your business, to be able to go through them and understand what invoice is attached to what template, and you would put that in this column. And then we would have our item name, a SKU if there is, item description, quantity, item price, if there's taxes, notes, terms and conditions, and payment method. Now, just something to note, you don't need all these fields filled out. Some of these fields won't even be required or applicable to you. So don't feel pressured to make sure all these fields are filled out. The key thing is to go in Zoho Books and select a file, go to the next page, and I just picked a random file where it will bring you to what is required. Now, I always go through this before any import to make sure that I have all the required fields filled out. And typically, when you start doing this for a while, for an invoice, a required field is the invoice number, the invoice date, and the customer.
Hey, Josh, real quick, as you are preparing to say kind of the finishing words for the session, I just want to remind everyone that in the chat, we have the evaluation for day 1. So please fill that out, even if you don't need CPE, but if you need CPE, you must fill that out. And I'm going to post that link again in the chat. You can fill that out for both sessions, for Josh's session as well as the first. And yeah, sorry, I know we're a little bit over, but Josh, please go ahead and let us know if there's anything specific that you want to close out with.
Sure. Can I just have
Yeah,
a
absolutely,
minute
absolutely.
to
Yeah, we're gonna go till 5 after, so you have like 2 minutes.
Okay, awesome. So thank you, Tala. I really appreciate that. And I apologize also for going over. I figured since Tala got away with it, I could also. So once we have everything imported and we looked at the mapping fields and we know what's required and what's not, we can import our data into the system. So just some quick closing words, so everybody knows, is that the migration is not such a big deal, in the sense of it's time consuming and work, but when you find a partner and find somebody who can do this with you and help you through it, it becomes easier. And your main involvement during this process and understanding is knowing your data, knowing what your data requires, and how you want your data to be able to be viewed in the new system. And if you have a role in that, and go through the process as much as possible to be able to proofread and look and feel comfortable with what data is being put in the system, your migration will go very successfully. And I want to personally thank everybody who's on this call. I really appreciate going through this with you and showing some small tips and tricks of how to create Excel sheets and how to import properly. And feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And I apologize about the time, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks very much, Josh. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Sorry we went a little bit over. There is a final poll question that Nathan's going to launch for us. And Nathan, if you could, please. I put up Josh's contact information on the screen. If you have any questions for us, you can always email accountants@zohocorp.com. You can also find support at zohobooks.com or the live chat. Really, really important before we close out. Please answer the evaluation for day 1. It's really important to help improve the session. And if you need CPE, you must fill that out. You'll also receive an email with that link, as well as a link to the recording for today's session. And if you need any handouts, you can currently go in the handouts tab and pull those out, although we will share slides with you. So thank you so much. We'll see you guys tomorrow, bright and early, 9 a.m. Pacific or noon Eastern, kind of in the afternoon. We are going to start off with Zoho Inventory. So it's going to be a really great session. Then we're going to go into the new Expense 2.0, subscriptions. It'll be a really, really great day. Please try to attend. If you know anyone else who's interested, share the registration link with them. And then last but not least, please don't forget to talk to your accountant or bookkeeper about taking a look at zoho.com/CPA. So with that, thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone.
And actually, real quick, while we're still on, I'm going to put our direct emails in the chat in case anyone wants to email us directly. If you have a question for Val, our emails are actually very easy. Val and I are just our first names at Zoho Corp, and Nathan is nathan.r. Those are in the chat for you. And I'm going to put the link for the evaluation one more time. All right, thanks, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and close out the session. We'll see you tomorrow. Somebody said there was an issue with the form when you're filling it out. Make sure all of the fields are entered. They're all mandatory fields. That may be the issue there. All right. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email us directly. Thanks.